Chapter 1396. Luo Yin glanced at Ling Yuanxing with some vigilance, and Ling Xiao immediately understood and waved his hand to take her into his realm. Looking at the world that was full of Taoist rhymes and spiritual vigor, Luo Yan's eyes narrowed. She was even more afraid of Ling Xiao. "Tell me." Ling Xiao stood on top of the sky palace with his hands behind his back and looked at the distant sky. At this time, the divine shadow of the Sword Palace and the thunderclouds of the Holy Tribulation had already disappeared. It was obvious that he had completely entered the Sage Realm. 81 days, 81 Saint Runes. In other words, Ling Xiao had already awakened from the Holy Tribulation a few months ago. It was not that his physical body could not withstand the power of the Holy Tribulation, but that the will of heaven and earth in the tribulation lightning had been completely devoured by him. Not to mention that no one had ever done such a thing before. Even the 9 heavens, he was the only one in the world. A supreme foundation. 9 was the number of extremes. It contained the great path of evolution. The number of double nines was the only one since ancient times. Ling Xiao had already reached the limit of all living things to pass through the Holy Tribulation. No one could last longer than him. In these few months, Ling Xiao had also used the Holy Tribulation lightning to refine his physical body's spiritual energy. To put it bluntly, the current Ling Xiao was flawless. In the 9 heavens, who could stand side by side with me for 1 billion years? When the cycle of reincarnation is chaotic, I dare to ask the devil to change the sky. Young master, early this morning, the Empress suddenly received a secret report. It said that she found traces of the Realm Master in the lower realm. She immediately set off. But who knew that there were actually countless evil spirits suppressed in the lower realm? When they saw the Empress, they wanted to capture her without saying anything. They even said that they wanted to. Luo Yin bit her red lips with a face full of embarrassment. She knew that to Ling Xiao, Gu Chao Ci was a taboo. Once someone coveted her beauty, it would definitely attract the true anger of the Ling people's young master. Jiying and Shi Haoyan were the ironclad proof. What? Hearing this, a wisp of rage instantly appeared on Ling Xiao's face. In a radius of 5,000 kilometers, thunderclouds pressed down, and the heavenly Tao collapsed. It was as if the entire world could not bear the might of his anger. "Young master, please hurry over. Everything the Empress has done is for your sake." Luo Yin kowtowed and did not get up for a long time, until a shadow suddenly appeared in front of her. Luo Yin looked up blankly, only to see that Ling Xiao's figure had already appeared in front of her. "I'm very curious. How did you escape from that dangerous lower realm?" At this moment, Ling Xiao's face inexplicably carried a trace of a gentle smile. However, he was clearly smiling, but it made Luo Yan's hair stand on end. Young master, what do you mean?" Luo Yin was trying to protect the Empress. That's why she desperately ran out to seek help from young lord. "Really? I'll give you a chance. Tell me exactly who ordered you to do this. Otherwise, I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death." Ling Xiao spoke indifferently. Before Luo Yin could react, a formation in tent suddenly pressed down from above her head, directly imprisoning her on the spot. This was Ling Xiao's domain, and there were many things he had set up there. With Ling Xiao's current cultivation level, even if someone at the peak of the saint stage rashly stepped in, they would only be at his mercy. Long before Luo Yin came to Ling people, Ling Xiao had already received Gui Ying's voice transmission, explaining the whole story to him. However, with Gui Ying's cultivation level, he naturally did not dare to rashly descend to the lower realm, much less leave the entrance to the lower realm. Therefore, although he guessed that Luo Yin was up to something, he did not see the scene of her voice transmission. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, had been waiting in the Great Hall for Luo Yin to come and perform. Of course, since she dared to come, she was confident that she would not expose the person behind the scenes. Therefore, Ling Xiao did not touch her soul sea at all, to avoid killing her on the spot. At this moment, he had imprisoned Luo Yan's spirit power and divine soul. Even if she wanted to kill herself, she could not do so. Young master, Luo Yin does not know what you are talking about. Young master, please quickly go to the Cloudwater region and save my empress. Luo Yan's eyes were filled with fear, but she still clenched her teeth and refused to speak. Of course I will save my fiancée. However, before I save her, don't you have anything to say to me? Ling Xiao nodded slightly, grabbed Luo Yan's neck, and headed towards the depths of the domain. With Gu Chaoxiai's luck, if someone could kill her in a lower realm, it meant that the realm master might really be hiding there. Ling Xiao could somewhat guess Luo Yan's origin. She might be from the realm master's palace, or Shadow Soul Palace. Other than that, Ling Xiao did not believe that anyone would dare to attack her. It was obvious that while he was in seclusion, someone had already started to miss him. Since Gu Chaoxiai was the flaw that he had placed in front of everyone, Ling Xiao had naturally expected such a trap. The reason why he had ordered Gui Ying to guard the entrance to the lower realm was to see if he could meet more suspicious people, or rather, to see the Lin family's attitude and understand the relationship between the two forces. Young master, although the Empress and I are master and servant, we are as close as sisters. I once swore on my Tao heart that I would never betray her. If you do not believe me, you can confront the Empress face to face. Or, I am willing to die to prove my sincerity. Young master, you can personally check my soul-sea memories. Luo Yin wailed in pain. However, other than opening her mouth to speak, she could not even move her limbs. I'm just worried that Chaozi is too soft-hearted and can't bear to kill you. So, let me be the bad guy. As for soul-searching, I may not be a good person, but I'm not a demon either. I can't do such a cruel thing. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. A mere chess piece dared to play mind games with him. Just as Ling Xiao had guessed, if he touched Luo Yan's soul-sea slightly, this chess piece would die instantly. To die requires courage, but to live requires even greater courage. In this world, there would always be people who wanted to die. However, for the sins they had committed, death was the lightest punishment. Young master. At this moment, Luo Yin was truly terrified and helpless. In particular, the coldness in Ling Xiao's eyes made her feel an indescribable fear. When the two figures descended from the sky, Han Zhan and the others immediately stood up and bowed in front of the Hall of Medicine. Greetings, master. Put her into the elixir fire spiritual formation and feed her the heart-addicting pill. Give her the antidote on time. I will give you 2 days to pry open her mouth. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao took a deep look at Han Zhan. Given this chosen one's understanding of spiritual materials, he must know very well what kind of medicine could make one wish for death. Luo Yin was very stubborn, but in her heart, her only way out was to die. However, she could not die now. There would be a moment when her mind would collapse. Looking at the figures that were bound to the iron pillars at the edge of the great formation to serve as the spiritual source of the formation. Looking at their shriveled bodies and dim and lifeless eyes, Luo Yin felt her body tremble and her mind almost crumble. Young master. No. If you remember anything, you can tell me at any time. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. Then, he disappeared from the spot. A traitor deserved the fate of a traitor. Since someone wanted to lure him out and force him to make a move, Ling Xiao did not mind going with the flow and fulfilling their wish. The king did not meet the king because the time was not right. However, there could only be one king. Ning Chuan, come with me. Boom! The entire sacred battle domain was shaken. Countless demon guards wearing black armor and holding heavy halberds followed closely behind Ling Xiao and stepped onto the ancient warship above them. Immediately, the ancient warship was filled with killing intent that shook the heavens and shattered the heavens. It was moving rapidly toward the Cloudwater region. Chapter 1397. Look, what's that? The entire Azure Sky world was in an uproar. Countless experts from the ancient sects and clans walked out of their palaces and looked up at the sky. At the end of their line of sight, a black figure that was 1,000 feet tall was flying past them rapidly. It's the mysterious heavenly ancient ship of the Taigu Ling people. Hiss! Looks like another sect is going to be unlucky. Countless cultivators stood there in shock and mumbled to themselves. There was nothing but fear in their eyes. At this moment, Ling Xiao stood at the bow of the ancient ship with his hands behind his back and looked at the sea of clouds in the distance. Although he had not appeared in the world for almost a year, he knew everything that had happened in the Azure Sky world. The current world was in chaos. Many sects and clans had appeared in the world to fight for the opportunity of heaven and earth. As for the immortal path, Ling Xiao had also heard of it. It was said that once the immortal path was opened, it would be a true sign of chaos. The people of the current generation would step on the immortal path and fight all the way. Those who could reach the end would obtain the opportunity to become an immortal. This temptation was irresistible to anyone. However, Ling Xiao somehow smelled a hint of conspiracy in this immortal path. The immortal path was a chaotic world, and monsters killed each other. In the end, countless sects lost their legacies just for an illusory opportunity to become an immortal. In this case, who would be the one to obtain the opportunity in this chaotic world? Ling Xiao's eyes were clear and calm. The sovereign of heaven would always have the means to eliminate all variables. Sometimes, an opportunity could completely end a chaotic world. Boom! In the end, the mysterious heavenly ancient ship fell from the sky and directly crushed an ancient mountain at the border of the Cloudwater world. At this moment, at the entrance of the lower world, the Lin family's elders looked at each other with their mouths slightly open. They were clearly panicking. Why did the Ling people's ship suddenly visit the Cloudwater world? Buzz. Suddenly, there was a buzzing sound in the void. A black-robed figure stepped out of the ancient ship. Clouds rose around him, and his aura was extraordinary. The sage stage elders bowed in fear. This is Ling people, Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao said indifferently. He landed in front of the Lin family experts and looked up at the ancient array that connected to the lower world. Previously, Spirit Shadow had already sent a voice transmission to tell him about the reactions of the Lin family members. It could be seen that the members of the Lin family were also surprised by Gu Chaoxiai's sudden descent. Clearly, this game of chess had nothing to do with the Lin family. It's actually young Master Ling people. May I know why the young lord is here? The elders of the Lin family looked at each other. They had just received a message from a disciple saying that someone had trespassed into the Lin family's lower realm. However, the Saint Stage expert they had sent out had yet to return. Apparently, something was happening in the realm of Hanyang. However, in the lower realm, the heavenly Tao order could only bear the cultivation of the Saint realm. Supreme Being powerhouses did not dare to rashly enter, lest they cause the heavenly Tao to collapse. Therefore, they could only stay here and try to find out the truth. My fiancé has been tricked into entering the lower realm. Everyone, before I return, I hope the Lin family can give me a reasonable explanation. Although it was not the Lin family who had lured Gu Chaoxiai into the lower realm, the Lin family was in the Lin family's territory. The lower realm was within the Lin family's territory. The hidden chess piece was more or less related to the Lin family. Since there were people who wanted to see Ling Xiao's attitude, Ling Xiao might as well let them see it clearly. No one was allowed to touch Gu Chaoxiai. Anyone who dared to touch her would have to be prepared to be destroyed. In this way, Ling Xiao's flaw would be confirmed again. What? Young lord, do you mean that the one who sneaked into the lower realm was Empress Gu? The elders of the Lin family changed their expressions. Finally, a trace of fear appeared in their eyes. If something really happened to Gu Chaoxiai in the lower realm of the Lin family would have to bear the responsibility. Those below the Supreme Being level, follow me into the lower realm. Those above the Supreme Being level, guard this array well. Kill anyone who comes close. Ling Xiao took a deep breath. The moment he took a step forward, his figure disappeared from the spot. Behind him, 20,000 black jade guards stepped forward at the same time. Except for the two commanders, the rest turned into a black flood and followed Ling Xiao into the array. Buzz! Instantly, heaven and earth buzzed. Murderous intent rose. Endless black clouds covered the land. There was not a trace of light. We're doomed. Someone must have deliberately framed the Lin family. Quick, report to the clan leader and find the elder in charge of this lower realm. Third elder, the elder in charge of this lower realm, seems to have gone down just now. What? Damn it, the Lin family is in danger. Third elder Lin then looked up at the sky and sighed. His eyes were full of bitterness. Ling Zhao's domineering nature was known to everyone in Qing. Also, as long as it was related to Gu Chaozi, there was no way to go back. Lin Nan and the others could only pray that Gu Chaozi was safe and sound. Otherwise, if she were to suffer even the slightest injury, the Lin family would face a calamity. Let's go back to the clan. Lin Nan pondered. His face was unprecedentedly serious. Someone had to bear the consequences of this matter in order to appease Ling Zhao's anger. There must be something wrong with the elder in charge of this lower realm. Now that he had stepped into the lower realm, he most likely would not be able to come back. If the Lin family wanted to preserve their heritage, they would have to find a scapegoat. Boom! The realm of Hanyang was originally an insignificant lower realm under the Lin family's control. There were many sects and clans that depended on the Lin family. Anyone who had reached the peak of the saint stage would be accepted by the Lin family and put in important positions. However, today an uninvited guest had suddenly appeared in this peaceful lower realm. Following that as promised, countless sect leaders, elders, and disciples blocked his path to the immortal platform and killed him with all their might. Gu Chaozi was wearing a red robe. She looked indifferent. That peerless celestial face was cold and gloomy for some reason. Behind her, a pair of phoenix wings covered the sky. The feathers were distinct and contained an unparalleled demonic aura. On the other hand, her eyes actually strangely revealed a strand of azure radiance, and she was like a primeval greater demon that was coiled with chaotic mist. However, her aura was weak. There was even a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. It was pitiful. Under her feet, corpses piled up like a mountain. It looked like hell on earth. However, compared to the figures standing in the void, it was still not worth mentioning. Countless people stood in front of the immortal platform, surrounding Gu Chaozi. As far as the eye could see, there were at least 10,000 people. There were a few old figures in front of the crowd. They were surrounded by holy will. Clearly, they were the top cultivators in this lower realm. By now, Gu Chaozi had guessed that Luo Yin had most likely betrayed her. This assassination had been planned for a long time. As soon as she stepped out of the ancient array, she was attacked. Fortunately, Gu Chaozi was now a saint stage cultivator. She also had the dragon phoenix Fate Qi protecting her. Even so, she was still heavily injured and was on the verge of death. Chapter 1398. Little girl, stop resisting. In order to kill you, I even dug out my ancestor. Today you must die. In the sky, 9 figures surrounded Gu Chaozi, trapping her on the mountain peak. All 9 of them had a wisp of holy will on them. The weakest among them was a second-grade saint. Of course, their holy will couldn't be compared to Gu Chaozi's. Most of them were fake saints who relied on pills and spiritual treasures to strengthen their divine trials. Originally, it was difficult to create so many saints with the spiritual qi in the lower world. And these people were the servants and pawns of Shadow Soul Palace, hidden in the lower world all year round. You don't deserve it. Gu Chaozi's tone was indifferent. Her imperial robe fluttered, and her eyes flickered with green light. There seemed to be the shadows of dragons and phoenixes flying. With the strength of these 9 saints, it was impossible for them to kill her. However, she was caught off guard and was besieged by the crowd, causing her to suffer heavy injuries. And the remaining exalts were like desperados. They didn't care at all. Therefore, Gu Chaozi was really at the end of the road in this battle. Let's see how long you can be so stubborn. One of the gray-haired elders smiled faintly and waved his hand. Behind him, countless wisps of spiritual qi bloomed in the sky. Then, like moths to a flame, They rushed toward Gu Chaoxiai angrily. Seeing this, Gu Chaoxiai's beautiful eyes turned cold. Multicolored light splashed around her. Wisps of chaotic chi filled the sky as if the world had been reopened. And she stepped forward. Holding the ancient sword in her hand, she slashed down. Buzz! There was a sudden buzz. The sword slashed down, splashing a path of blood. Gu Chaoxiai was strong, but there were too many of them. Hundreds of exalts and divine emperors rushed over from all directions. They waved their spiritual treasures and smashed down. Boom! Boom! Countless wisps of spiritual chi bloomed in the sky like a sea of stars. Some exalts even chose to destroy their own bodies and souls in an attempt to injure Gu Chaoxiai. Pucci. In the end, the phoenix image outside Gu Chaoxiai's body was shattered, and she retreated 100 feet away. Blood flowed from her mouth onto her emperor's robe, dyeing it black. However, before she could even rest for a moment, countless figures flashed over from the horizon once more, and they completely drowned her figure with the aura of death. Only the 9 Saint Realm experts did not make a move from the beginning to the end. They only looked at the sea of blood and bones with sinister eyes. There was no trace of pity on their faces. Obviously, they knew that killing Gu Chaoxiai with the strength of the 9 of them was no different from a fool's dream. However, even someone at the pinnacle of the saint's stage would quickly run out of spiritual power, and it would be difficult for them to resist. Time passed slowly. Corpses were piled high in front of the immortal platform. Gu Chaoxiai's aura was extremely weak. Although there was no trace of panic in her eyes, there was a trace of unwillingness. Little girl, do you still want to resist? Could it be that you want to kill the entire lower realm? The 9 Saint Realm experts shook their heads and smiled, but there was fear in their eyes. If it were them, they would have been severely injured and killed in the first attack. However, Gu Chaoxiai had endured 3 attacks and killed nearly 1,000 cultivators. Gu Chaoxiai ignored the 9's mockery. Her eyes suddenly flashed with determination. The dragon and phoenix images around her suddenly dispersed, and an indescribably terrifying demonic aura quietly swept over. Blue mist rose into the sky as if it had been blown over from ancient times, and it contained the indescribable aura of heaven and earth. Gu Chaoxiai's figure began to shine with dazzling light. Her hair and eyes shone with supreme divinity. Vast immortal aura was awakened, and the entire realm of Hanyang exploded with astonishing spiritual power. Chirp! Suddenly, a loud and clear phoenix cry came from the mist. A phoenix image that was 100 feet tall appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was an immortal phoenix covered in blue feathers. It was pure, and every feather on its body was surrounded by dense spiritual light. Shocking blood, chi, surged to the 9 heavens, like a sea of blood. The 9 Saint Realm experts' expressions changed, and they felt their spiritual power show signs of freezing. It was too terrifying. Not to mention the lower realm, there were no phoenixes even in the Azure continent. However, the blue phoenix in front of them seemed to have descended from the primordial age, and its entire body was indescribably domineering. She spread her wings and covered thousands of miles of the sky. Countless ordinary people only saw the dark sky and the huge phoenix soaring into the sky. There was nothing but fear in their eyes. Even many cultivators knelt on the ground and kowtowed as if they had seen a miracle. Oh no! Attack! The 9 Saint Realm experts' eyes trembled. Sacred artifacts appeared in their hands, and then they used all their spiritual power to attack the immortal phoenix. The mountains and seas were all shattered. The 9 Saint Realm experts' power was unimaginable. Even a trace of their power was enough to shatter people's minds and make them tremble uncontrollably. Gu Chaoxiai let out a cry, flapped her wings, and rushed toward the entrance of the upper realm. A foul wind and spiritual power rose together. Endless Taoist rhymes formed the sun, moon, and stars, and swept across the entire realm. But, with Gu Chaoxiai's current realm, she was unable to support the formation of this demon body, and she was already at the end of her rope. Therefore, the moment the 9 sacred artifacts came crashing down, layers of blood mist bloomed on her body. Even so, the moment she flapped her wings, a huge amount of divine power came crashing down, and the void shattered. The 9 sacred artifacts let out a mournful cry and shattered in the sky. Pucci, the 9 Saint Realm experts' bodies trembled, and the shock in their eyes grew stronger. A few of them with lower realms were severely injured, and blood spurted out of their mouths. Gu Chaoxiai's figure fell to the ground and returned to human form. Her hair was messy, but it couldn't hide her peerless beauty. She stood up slowly, and her eyes were stubborn, but there was a trace of helplessness. A cool breeze blew, and her red robe fluttered. What was reflected in her eyes was a determined and gentle face. Ling Xiao, I'm sorry. I failed to keep my promise this time. Gu Chaoxiai's spiritual power had dissipated, and even the demon core in her body was a little dim. She stepped on the sea of corpses, and her figure was graceful and determined. Even though she had lost, she was still unruly and unruly. We can't wait any longer, Elder Chun. The 9 saints took a deep breath. The mockery on their faces had long disappeared, and it was replaced by fear from the bottom of their hearts. A Saint Realm woman had killed thousands of exalted realm and emperor gods, and she still had the strength to fight against 9 saints. How domineering was this? If she was given a little time to breathe, the outcome of today's battle would be hard to predict. Sigh. A heavy sigh suddenly came from the depths of the void. In the next moment, a golden handprint formed in the sky and covered the sky, and it came crashing down with the power to destroy the heavens. Divine runes circled around the handprint, and it was as if a sun had descended from the sky, suppressing everything. Chapter 1399. The heavens collapsed, and the mountains and seas were overturned. 100 zhang long divine seal swept across the heavens and earth like an abyss, swallowing all things. Gu Chaoxiai's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. There seemed to be the evolution of an era, and the stars of the heavens were born. At this moment, she could feel that the person who attacked was an expert at the peak of the Saint Realm. He had faintly touched the threshold of the Supreme Realm. If she was at her peak and used the great Tao of chaos, the Blue Phoenix true body might not be defeated. However, at this moment, all the spiritual energy in her body had been exhausted. It was difficult for her to struggle. She could only watch as the palm fell and annihilated the mountains. My child, I may not be able to wait until you are born, but I will definitely not let you suffer the slightest bit of harm. Gu Chaoxiai closed her eyes in despair. Suddenly, the primal chaos appeared around her. Vaguely, the shadow of a world condensed above her head. It wanted to destroy this world and disappear. But, at this moment, an ear-piercing buzzing sound suddenly came from the distant heavens. Immediately after, a wave of coldness fell from the heavens like a meteor falling from the 9 heavens. Gu Chaoxiai suddenly opened her eyes. She raised her head and looked at the end of the sea of clouds. There, an ancient bronze sword seemed to fall from the primordial chaos. It pierced through the heavens and earth and slashed horizontally. Suddenly, Gu Chaoxiai smiled. Her jade-like hand covered her red lips. Tears rose in her eyes. Above the void, the expressions of the 9 Saint Realm experts changed. It was as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. Even their bodies could not help but tremble. Behind the ancient bronze sword, hundreds of sword shadows were like a flood. They went against the immortal ancient realm. Above each ancient sword, endless holy will lingered. The rhythm of the Tao was leisurely. Each of them had their own wonders. It was as if a great wall of sword chi separated the ancient era and cut through time. It was unimaginable. Hundreds of holy swords slashed down at the same time. Perhaps even a Supreme Realm expert would find it difficult to block the sharpness. It was like a dream. It made people mistakenly think that there were hundreds of sword immortals descending from the heavens and earth. Unparalleled sword power cut through the universe. neatly cutting the entire sky. The golden palm print, in the end, did not land. It was directly cut into pieces by the sword intent flood. It turned into flowing light that scattered down. Then, everyone raised their heads and looked at the end of the heavens. At first, there were only clouds and mist without any ripples. Then, the clouds were torn apart, and boundless multicolored light burst forth. They saw a young man dressed in black walking down from the sky. His body was bright, but it made people feel an indescribable chill, fear that came from the depths of their bones. He was like a great demon who had stepped into the ancient times and floated in the six realms. The eyes of the 9 Saint Realm experts suddenly narrowed. Their mouths opened slightly, and their breaths could only go in but not out. They simply could not imagine that the sword just now was swung by a youth. Moreover, looking at his appearance and bone structure, he was at most 24-25 years old. However, his body gave off an aura that seemed to be in harmony with the heavens and the earth, as if he was above the heavens. Even old Chun, a 9th-grade Saint Realm expert, was terrified and didn't dare to act rashly. Even though he had cultivated for thousands of years, he had never felt such a feeling before. However, the heavenly Tao of the realm of Hanyang didn't allow supreme cultivators to come here. Who was this young man? Heaven and earth were silent. Only the young man was walking on clouds. The sea of stars under his feet was resplendent, making him look like a demon god. In the end, he descended from the sky and landed in front of Gu Chao Ci. His eyes trembled, and a gentle smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, Ling Xiao could see that there were piles of blood and bones under Gu Chao Ci's feet. According to Ling Xiao's prediction, even if he didn't show up today, these pseudo-saints in front of him wouldn't be able to kill Gu Chao Ci. Breaking through at the brink of death and awakening a new talent was something that only the heavens could do. Moreover, Gu Chao Ci now had the immortal Phoenix ancient bloodline, but she hadn't comprehended the innate ability of the Phoenix clan, and this deadlock might be an opportunity for her. Why are you so disobedient? Is this a dangerous place for you to come? After saying that, before Gu Chao Ci could speak, he had already reached out his hand and gently wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Do I have to bring a rope to wrap around your waist and bring you wherever I go? Only then will you be safer. Oomph. Gu Chao Ci pursed her red lips, but the mist in her eyes became more and more turbulent. She couldn't remember how many times Ling Xiao had appeared in front of her in such an unparalleled manner. It seemed that every time she was in trouble, he would be able to rush over, regardless of whether they were separated by mountains or seas. He seemed to have the ability to hear her inner cries. Beep. The destined girl is moved and unable to control her emotions. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2,000 luck points and 20,000 villain points. Looking at the woman in front of him who was clearly moved but still stubborn, Ling Xiao sighed softly and hugged her in his arms. He whispered softly in her ear, Gu Chao Ci, my heart will ache if you do this. Ling Xiao, Gu Chao Ci's delicate body trembled. Sniffing the scent in his hair, her originally tense heart suddenly relaxed. I'm sorry, between you and me, there's no need to say these things. Just don't be willful in the future. Ling Xiao shook his head and used his arm to hold Gu Chao Ci's jade-like legs. Immediately, the latter cried out in surprise and hugged his neck with both hands. Ling Xiao, wife, if there comes a day when your husband has the entire world as my enemy, you will also fight side by side with me, won't you? Ling Xiao smiled and suddenly clenched his other hand. Instantly, the reincarnation devil blade appeared in his hand. Divine radiance flowed on the blade, and lightning ran, just like a god's precious weapon. I don't want to. At this moment, Gu Chao Ci seemed to be sitting in Ling Xiao's arms. Her legs were hanging down, and her beautiful face was blushing. She lowered her head and looked at the handsome face that was close to her. Her red lips were lightly pursed, but there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. Looks like your husband still needs to prepare a rope to tie you firmly to my waist. Ling Xiao smiled brightly and looked up at the sky. Ling people, young master, you are finally here." The 9 saints looked at each other, and their eyes flashed with a touch of gloominess. Ling Xiao had just cut open the sky with his sword and shocked the world. However, this was the realm of Hanyang. No matter how powerful these 2 people were, how could they fight against 10,000 people? Elder Chun, since young master is here, then we can only send young master to his death. Saint Chun humphed coldly. He suppressed the fear in his heart and suddenly raised his hand. Countless disciples behind him looked serious, and their eyes were filled with the desire to die. They shouted together, "Send young master to his death." "Ah!" Ling Xiao looked up at the sky and laughed. The next moment, his eyes suddenly turned cold. "Kill." Hearing Ling Xiao shout, the 9 saints froze. Then, as if they had sensed something, they looked up at the sky. There, countless people in black armor stepped out of the ancient array. They were orderly and majestic like statues, holding their black halberds tightly in their hands. In fact, the number of them was even greater than the number of disciples behind the 9 saints. Moreover, the weakest among them was at the honorable stage, and the 8 people who were leading them were at the saint stage. Originally, the 10 leaders of the Black Demon Guards were all saints. Now that a year had passed, 2 of them had become earthly sovereigns. Among the remaining 8, 2 were at the peak of the saint realm. This combat strength was enough to defeat many forces in the Azure continent. Moreover, these demon guards had walked out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Every move they made was purely a killing force. How could some pawns be compared to them? This is boom. The black torrent stepped down from the sky. The dancing black halberds were like demonic suns that destroyed the heavens. Ling Xiao stepped out. He held Gu Chao Si in his arms and raised the demonic blade in his hand. Chapter 1400. Rumble. The heavens and earth trembled as divine light surged. Countless spiritual lights were extinguished in an instant. Divine treasures cracked and blood rained down from the sky. It was a ghastly sight. Tens of thousands of people were fighting. That scene was soul-stirring. However, compared to the Black Devil Guards, the cultivators of the Hanyang region could only defend themselves and perish in the end. The sound of killing shook the sky. Corpses and bones piled up into mountains. The thick smell of blood spread for tens of thousands of miles. Ling Xiao held Gu Chao Si in his arms. The moment he slashed out the demonic blade in his hand, several figures were torn apart. Above his head, 100 divine swords whistled and roared. They were like a sword chi barrier that disintegrated all the attacks. Furthermore, every living thing that came within 100 feet of him was slashed into nothingness by the unparalleled sword chi. Now that he had entered the saint realm, he could control 100 divine weapons from the 10,000 weapons Taoist scripture. Such a method could be said to be world-shaking. Ling Xiao had 900 sword bones in his body. His sword Dao could be said to be invincible. Tens of thousands of spiritual lights rose. Ling Xiao's eyes reflected the blood-red clouds. Even Gu Chao Si felt the killing intent from the former. Looking at the 100 swords falling down and reaping lives, she felt her heart trembling. However, she felt inexplicably at ease. At this moment, Ling Xiao seemed to have transformed into Ganjiang. He held Mo Xie and danced. The heavens and earth could not bear his power. He was like Lu Bu, the god of war. Wherever he went, the sky demon would dazzle and 10,000 swords would strike. However, he was different from Lu Bu. This time, his sable cicada was on his waist. Ling Xiao died. At this moment, an angry shout came from the crowd. A third-level Saint Realm old man broke free from the crowd and stepped out from the sky. Around his body, there were divine marks lingering and suppressing the heavens. "Oh, how do you know my name?" Ling Xiao smiled and looked at the old man in a brown robe playfully. His whole body was covered with divine light. He was like a war immortal that shocked the world. Wherever his gaze passed, order would descend and light would flourish. The 100 sacred swords merged into a single sword and slashed down brazenly. The brown-robed elder narrowed his eyes and extended his palm. Boundless spiritual light condensed into a seal that went towards the sword shadow. Seeing this, Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, his eyes full of ridicule. Even an ordinary peak powerhouse wouldn't dare to take this sword head-on, let alone a third-grade Saint Realm cultivator without any luck. This whole thing was really naive. Pucci, accompanied by a muffled sound, a wisp of boundless sword will flashed in the void, shining brightly. In an instant, the sky was overturned, and the sun and moon lost their light. As for the brown-robed old man's body, it was directly torn apart from the middle and blood splattered all over the ground. No. Finally, under the massacre of the Black Devil Guards, other than the remaining 8 Saint Stage powerhouses who could barely resist, the remaining ordinary disciples couldn't even resist. Seeing their fellow disciples explode into a bloody mist, some of the weak-willed ones finally began to collapse. The mighty momentum swept across thousands of miles. The divine light was annihilated, and blood stained the blue sky. Everyone looked at the pile of bones under their feet and felt a chill run down their spines. Even those who had already made up their minds to die felt their hearts tremble at this moment, as if they had seen a great horror that shattered their Tao heart. No, I don't want to die. Run. Ling Xiao strolled across the sky and slashed down with the demonic blade in his hand, quietly devouring the blood and divine souls of these exalted realm cultivators. Under the cover of the layers of blood, his actions naturally went unnoticed. Moreover, with the 100 swords clashing, it was reasonable for these exalted realm cultivators' bodies and divine souls to be smashed into pieces. Until the sounds of killing between heaven and earth gradually stopped. The 20,000 demonic guards stood in the sky and surrounded the 8 saints. Only then did Ling Xiao's footsteps stop. He lowered his head and saw the panic and helplessness on the 8 saints' faces. His eyes were full of coldness. Who was it that sent you? The reason why they were still alive was not because they were powerful, but because Ling Xiao had already ordered them not to be killed. According to Ling Xiao's guess, since these people dared to appear here, they probably would not leave any evidence behind. In fact, they might not even know who they were listening to. Lord Ling Xiao, I don't want to die, but I really don't know who ordered us to do this. We were just following orders. Please give us a chance. One of the middle-aged saints' lips trembled slightly, and he was about to kneel on the ground. Ling Xiao shook his head, but a commander of the Black Devil Guards behind the Saint Plane suddenly attacked and smashed the Saint Plane's head with a halberd. I'll talk. It's him, Chen Changsho. He ordered us to do this. Chen Changsho. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and turned to look at the old man at the peak of the Saint Realm. Ling Xiao originally thought that these people from the lower world should not know his name. After all, this was a real primitive realm. No ancient clans from the upper world were exiled here. Since they knew his identity, it was very likely that someone from the upper world was here. That's right. It's him. He is the elder of the Lin clan. We have been following his orders all these years. Please forgive us. Elder of the Lin clan. The smile on Ling Xiao's face deepened. Heavenly light bloomed in his eyes like a bloody moon that trapped the world. However, at this moment, Chen Changsho, who was at the 9th level of the Saint Realm, suddenly shattered his own soul. Blood flowed out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and he fell from the sky. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed, but his face remained calm. He had guessed this would happen. It was obvious that Chen Changsho was a spy planted in the Lin family. These people from the realm of Hanyang were all death servants that he had trained. Now that he was dead, it would be extremely difficult to find the one behind this. Of course, Ling Xiao didn't need to find the one behind this. He knew that only one force had the guts to set him up. It was the Realm Lord Palace. Master, we were all fooled by Chen Changsho. Please let us go. By the way, Master, Chen Changsho sneaked to the Ascension platform. Puff! As the Saint Realm cultivators were begging for mercy, Ling Xiao suddenly slashed out the demonic blade in his hand and cut off the head of one of them. Those who hurt my wife will not be forgiven." Before the Saint Realm cultivators could speak again, the 8 Demon Guard commanders behind them suddenly smashed down with their black halberds. Boom! Boundless power fell from the sky. Not to mention the 8 Demon Guards. Even the 2 peak Saint Realm cultivators could kill these fake Saint Realm cultivators who survived the divine trial with the help of Dan beads and treasures. Therefore, the Saint Realm cultivators only felt that the world was dark. It felt like a mountain was falling from the sky and crushing their bodies. After doing all this, Ling Xiao lowered his head and looked at the mountain below. On the mountain covered by bones, there was a high platform standing in the clouds. It was simple and solemn, like a spectator who had been there for a long time. Ling Xiao stepped on the stone platform and saw a round crystal stone standing there quietly. It didn't have any luster. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't notice it. Chapter 1401. This is an image-preserving stone. Gu Chaoxiai exclaimed softly. Her eyes immediately flashed with murderous intent. As expected, her descent to the lower realm and Ling Zhao's arrival were all part of someone's plan. However, Gu Chaoxiai could not figure it out. She had descended to the lower realm alone and was at risk of dying. Ling Xiao must have descended to the lower realm for her. Naturally, he would have made preparations. What exactly was the person who set this up planning? Hearing that, Ling Zhao's expression did not change in the slightest. Instead, he carried Gu Chaoxiai in his arms and walked to the image-preserving stone. He smiled gently and said, "I will find you and then kill you." After saying that, he suddenly lifted his foot and stomped the image-preserving stone into pieces. Ling Xiao, I can't figure out. Gu Chaoxiai's expression was serious. She turned to look at the young man before her. You must have come here because Luo Yin lured you here, right? Yes. Ling Xiao nodded and smiled gently. His eyes were bright. He naturally understood Gu Chaoxiai's confusion. In the end, the true purpose of this plan was not to kill him. Instead, it was to test him. The reason why he did not conceal his cultivation today was to make the person behind the scenes believe that he was truly angry. That was why he did not conceal his cultivation at all. From there, it would prove that Gu Chaoxiai was the flaw in his Taoist heart. However, from the looks of it, the person behind the scenes was indeed extremely ruthless. Just to test his bottom line, they were willing to pay such a price. 9 Sage Realm experts, close to 10,000 exalted realm experts and God Emperors. This was a huge amount. Then, they know that they can't kill you. Why do they still do this? Wouldn't it be better to kill me? Gu Chaoxi's eyebrows were slightly furrowed. Her black hair fell over her face, making her look even more charming. For some reason, Ling Xiao actually saw a different kind of temperament in her eyes at this moment. It seemed seductive. Why are you looking at me? Seeing that Ling Xiao was silent for a long time, Gu Chaoxiai was stunned. When she looked down again, she saw that the corners of the young man's mouth were raised with a hint of evil. Her delicate body suddenly tensed up. Wife, is your husband strong? Gu Chaoxiai bit her red lips. If she didn't know Ling Zhao's temperament, she would have thought that he was referring to his combat strength. However, the playfulness in his eyes was truly infuriating. Shameless. My wife, your injuries aren't light. I'm afraid that ordinary medicinal pills won't be able to heal you. Tonight, your husband will properly nurse your injuries. Ling Xiao smiled gently. Ignoring Gu Chaoxiai's struggles, he carried her towards the entrance of the upper realm. However, just as his figure was about to disappear, he suddenly waved his hand and stabbed the Samsara devil blade into the mountain of corpses and sea of blood. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed. Demonic power swept across the area. The surging blood energy turned into a blood-red vortex that covered the entire area. The great Tao and multicolored light were all annihilated. The area within a radius of 10,000 miles around the immortal platform was turned into a forbidden area. Ling Xiao, let go of me. You haven't answered my question. I'll tell you later why they led me here. Ling Xiao raised his hand and slapped Gu Chaoxiai's butt. Be good and don't move. You. Gu Chaoxiai's face was red. She felt a numbing sensation where Ling Zhao's hand landed. Her eyes were filled with embarrassment and anger. However, at this moment, her spiritual energy was exhausted. She was exhausted and didn't have much strength to struggle. She could only let him carry her into the ancient void formation. Buzz! Accompanied by a buzzing sound, the two figures appeared in the cloud-water region. At this moment, countless figures were standing quietly at the entrance of the ancient formation. Their eyes carried a wisp of seriousness. Ling Xiao was no stranger to the longevity Lin clan. After all, several of the clan's geniuses had died at his hands. Master Ling Xiao. At this moment, a middle-aged man in a black robe stood in front of the crowd and called out softly. He walked up to Ling Xiao and bowed to him as a saint. In particular, Gu Chaoxiai's current weakness made him tense up. He was indescribably terrified. Plop! Behind Ling Xiao, a black demon guard commander threw Chun Changsho's body to the ground without saying anything. Looking at this elder of the Lin clan who didn't share the same surname, the faces of the Lin clan members paled. Their eyes flashed with despair. Young master, Chun Changsho, I said, give me a reasonable explanation before I come back. Ling Zhao's expression was indifferent. No one could tell if he was happy or angry. Gu Chaoxiai leaned on his shoulder tiredly, her eyelashes trembling. Seeing this, the Lin clan leader gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, "Bring him here." Clan leader, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't know Chun Changsho was so ambitious. A supreme martial artist of the Lin family was shackled, and his spiritual energy and cultivation were sealed. He was pushed in front of Ling Xiao by two Lin family elders. Young master, 900 years ago, it was this person who took Chun Changsho into the Lin clan. Apart from this, I, Lin Mo, swear on my Dao heart that the Lin clan has nothing to do with Chun Changsho. The head of the Lin family, Lin Mo, took a deep breath and took out a chinquin bag. In order to make up for the guilt in my heart, I hope young master will accept these 3 saint swords, 3 saint armors, and a level 9 pill. Everyone knew that Ling Xiao was a swordsman. Catering to his interests might be able to solve the Lin clan's crisis today. Moreover, 6 sacred weapons and a 9th grade elixir were already the foundation of the Lin clan. If Ling Xiao still didn't relent, the Lin family would really be powerless to do anything. Of course, the Lin family supreme ancestor will be completely at your disposal. Lin Mo's eyes were filled with sorrow, but there was nothing he could do. An Earth sovereign, no matter which force he was in, was respected as a Dao ancestor. However, if he could use his life to prove the Lin clan's innocence and appease Ling Zhao's emotions, it was not impossible. At the end of the day, in this world, strength was respected. If the person who had barged into the Lin clan's territory was a disciple of a small clan, then the one kneeling on the ground would be an elder or a successor of that clan. The weak were prey to the strong, and the weak were bullied. This had been the case since ancient times. What do you think, my wife? Ling Xiao smiled gently and turned to look at the pale and weak Gu Chaoxiai. His eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. With Gu Chaoxiai's chaotic body and immortal phoenix true body, she should not be so weak even if her spiritual energy was depleted. It was obvious that she was exaggerating a little at this moment. Could this be the so-called marry a chicken and follow the chicken? Bah, follow the husband and wife. You decide. I'm tired and want to go back to the palace to rest. Gu Chaoxiai opened her eyes slightly and changed into a more comfortable position, nestling against Ling Zhao's neck. Her breath was really irresistible. My wife, after you said, I even thought of a posture. If I find out that the Lin clan is behind this, the Cloudwater region will definitely suffer the wrath of the Ling people. Ling Xiao coldly glanced at the venerable supreme ancestor. His palm suddenly reached out and directly smashed the venerable supreme ancestor's head. Only then did he take the chinquin pouch from Lin Mo and lead the group of black jade guards into the distance. Chapter 1402. Given the Lin family's background, although they were also unparalleled in the azure firmament, the more they were like this, the more Ling Xiao would not forgive them. The more forgiving a person was, the more vicious they would be when they gained power. Ling Xiao didn't believe that the Lin clan would be grateful to him for sparing the Lin clan's ancestor. In the end, it was always the Ling clan and the World Lore Hall's chances of victory that would decide this side's camp. Family head, Ling Xiao has gone too far. Our Lin clan was set up. Otherwise, who would set up such a clumsy trap in our own territory? The elders of the Lin family were enraged, especially when they saw that Elder Jizun being slapped to death by Ling Xiao like an animal. It was even more infuriating. Set up. Lin Mo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Why don't we frame others? Isn't it because someone planted a spy in our clan? Do you think the Ling people's young master doesn't know that we were set up? But if the Lin clan doesn't pay the price, anyone can touch Gu Chao Ci in the future. He's using our Lin clan to establish his power. He's also telling us not to do anything stupid. Family head, seal the realm of Hanyang and bury ancestor Yuan. Lin Mo didn't say anything else. He turned around and went into the depths of the Cloudwater region. He didn't even go down to check. When the Black Devil Guards went to war, not even a blade of grass would survive. The realm of Hanyang was most likely in a terrible situation. At the same time, in the void, an ancient warship towered over the heavens and the earth, heading towards the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty. In the ancient ship's pavilion, Gu Chao Ci blushed. She tried to break free from Ling Zhao's embrace, but he hugged her tightly and pressed her against the bed. That pair of straight jade legs were even longer than Bai Jishi's entire body. The emperor's robe fell, revealing her shocking snow-white skin. Ling Xiao, don't. Here, wife, I'm going to start healing you. Ling Xiao smiled gently and stopped Gu Chao Ci from speaking. Ooh, wife, give me your hand. Try this move of mine. You softer. Along the way, the profound heavenly ancient ship kept bumping. The journey that should have taken half a day had now taken an entire day. The next morning, Ling Xiao and Gu Chao Ci woke up in the palace hall. At this time, the empress's face had already regained its rosy color. Moreover, compared to before, the current Gu Chao Ci seemed to be a little more proactive. The green light that flickered in her eyes from time to time was clearly somewhat enchanting. Of course, most of the time, or in front of others, she was still the aloof, proud, and otherworldly great empress of Mortal Phoenix. Ling Xiao, can you tell me now? Gu Chao Ci's jade-like figure stood upright, wrapped in a long red blanket. Her fine black hair was slightly messy, but it couldn't hide her celestial appearance. Her bright eyes were like water, rippling with waves. Ling Xiao reached out and held her in his arms, gently stroking her hair. Actually, you should have guessed who wants to kill me, right? World Lord Palace, Xue Shiyan. Gu Chao Ci nodded slightly. She didn't seem to be against Ling Zhao's intimacy anymore. With her shrewdness, it was easy for her to guess who was behind this trap. She just couldn't figure out why Xue Shiyan would go through so much trouble. I have killed a descendant of the Seventh Palace before. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, looking rather lazy. A descendant of the Seventh Palace? That's right. The descendant of Shadow Soul Palace, Qingyang. But what does that have to do with Xue Shiyan's scheme against you? Gu Chao Ci frowned slightly, feeling more and more confused. If Xue Shiyan wanted to kill Ling Xiao, she wouldn't have just arranged a group of saints in the realm of Hanyang. She had gone through so much trouble and even exposed so many of her spies just to lure Ling Xiao here. Wasn't that a bit stupid? By killing the descendant of the Seventh Palace, I have actually broken the stable situation between the Ling people and the World Lord Palace. Therefore, Xue Shiyan has let go of his worries. However, if I die, the World Lord Palace will definitely suffer the revenge of the Ling people. Therefore, even if she wants to kill me one day, she will definitely do it herself, using the excuse of the generation's final battle. Ling Xiao sneered. This was the biggest difference between him and Xue Shiyan. In the end, although the young master of the World Lord Palace was scheming, he still shouldered the responsibility of the sovereign of heaven. His thoughts and actions had to be for the World Lord Palace. However, Ling Xiao was different. If he had the chance to kill Xue Xiyin, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. Whether it was a supreme or a great emperor, there was nothing he wouldn't do. Then why is he going through so much trouble? Gu Chaosai nodded lightly, not saying anything. As the young master of the World Lord Palace, Xue Xiyin and Ling Xiao would have a battle in the end. This would also be the key to determining the outcome of the battle between the Ling people and the World Lord Palace, intimidating and controlling the sovereign of heaven. To the various forces of the Azure Continent, the side they chose to rely on would definitely be the side with a higher chance of winning. If I'm not wrong, he probably received some news and knows that I'm in seclusion. Therefore, he wants to use you as an excuse to lure me out and destroy my Dao heart. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. This method was indeed sinister, but it was also a clever move. With the affection Ling Xiao displayed towards Gu Chaosai before, the entire Azure Continent would probably believe that the immortal Phoenix Empress was Ling Xiao's forbidden area. At the critical moment of his seclusion, he tricked Gu Chaosai into going to the lower realm to kill her. Once Ling Xiao knew about this, his Dao heart would definitely be shaken and it would be difficult for him to reach perfection again. Of course, if Ling Xiao didn't come today and Gu Chaosai died in the lower realm, then when he came out of seclusion, he would be beyond redemption. A flaw in his Dao heart would create a demonic barrier, and his immortal path would be completely destroyed. But if you are in seclusion and don't know, then when I find out, I'm afraid I will never be able to forgive myself. Ling Xiao laughed bitterly. Although his tone was calm, Gu Chaosai's eyes trembled slightly. Ling Xiao, I'm sorry. I said, between you and me, there is no need for this. Whether it's the World Lord Palace or the immortal gods of the nine heavens, if they dare to touch you, I will kill them. Ling Xiao lowered his head and kissed Gu Chaosai's forehead. This time, she didn't dodge. Instead, she gently wrapped her arms around Ling Xiao's shoulders. Wife, it's still early. I feel that your injuries can recover a bit faster. Ling Xiao, another day passed. On this day, all the cultivators of the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty were surprised to see an ancient warship above the imperial palace, towering in the sky. Whether it was the Gu clan's ancestor or the elders, they were all standing neatly below the ancient warship with respectful expressions. However, other than the 20,000 black jade guards standing quietly on the ancient warship, Master Ling Xiao and the female empress had yet to appear. At this time, Gu Chaosai was looking at the young man who was sleeping beside her. Green light flowed in her eyes, and a rare smile appeared on her face. She stretched out her hand and stroked his hair and cheeks. She was gentle and soft, completely different from her usual self. At this time, Ling Xiao seemed to have sensed something. He frowned slightly. However, Gu Chaosai retracted her hand in shock. She closed her eyes nervously and pretended to be asleep. However, Ling Xiao didn't wake up. He turned around and hugged her in his arms out of habit. Gu Chaosai carefully turned her head and looked at the face that was close to her. A smile appeared on her face again. Everyone knew that Lord Ling Xiao was unparalleled and invincible. However, only she knew what this young man had sacrificed along the way. My husband, I will always be with you no matter what. Gu Chaosai's eyelashes trembled. She actually took the initiative to place her lips on Ling Xiao's forehead. Until, late at night, two figures walked out of the mysterious heavenly ancient ship side by side. Looking at the Gu family members who were bitterly waiting below, Gu Chaosai's face suddenly turned red. Haha, young master, please excuse us for not going out to welcome you. The Gu family's ancestors smiled brightly and bowed. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, smiled gently and turned to look at Gu Chaosai. My wife, for the next few days, stay in the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty and don't go anywhere. Otherwise, your husband will really find a rope and tie you around my waist. Yumph. Strangely, looking at the evil look in Ling Xiao's eyes, Gu Chaosai seemed to have thought of a strange scene. The red on her face became even redder, and she awkwardly fell into the depths of the imperial palace. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, was smiling as he watched the fleeing figure. There was a rare trace of gentleness in his eyes. Compared to before, Gu Chaoxiai's body now had a trace of smoke and fire. She seemed more real. Chapter 14:03. Farewell, young master. In the immortal Phoenix Imperial Palace, the Gu clan's ancestors bowed and watched as the ancient warship broke through the sky and disappeared. At this moment, Ling Zhao's figure appeared directly in the realm and landed in front of the medicine hall. These 2 days, Ling Zhao had appeared in the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty so ostentatiously because he had another motive. Whether it was Chun Changsho or Luo Yin, they had not exposed any of the secrets of the Realm Lord Palace. However, there was some useful information hidden in their soul seas. If Ling Zhao was in a hurry to return now, Xue Xian would definitely be on guard and even set up a backup plan. The more Ling Zhao delayed, the more Xue Xian would be at ease, knowing that he had not obtained any valuable information. In fact, when Ling Zhao had left the Cloud Water region, Han Zhan had already sent news. Although Luo Yin did not know who she obeyed, she vaguely remembered the place where she had been captured and trained when she was young. Black Mountain, Red River, Cold City, Fragrant Courtyard. Based on this news, Ling Zhao sent Folded Shadow and the others to find a place that matched this description. Soon, Folded Shadow sent news that to the east of the Azure Continent, near the extreme north, there was an ancient city called Cold Mountain City. This city was backed by a pitch-black ancient mountain. The moat around the city was filled with reddish-brown water all year round, making it look like a river of blood. In this Cold Mountain City, there was a famous place called the Fragrant House. It was said that this house gathered beauties from all races in the Azure Continent. Even the barbarian tribe women in the extreme north were not few in number. It attracted the attention of all the big ancient sects and clans. From the outside, this seemed to be an ordinary fragrant house where people ate, drank, and played. However, in these 2 days, Folded Shadow found that there seemed to be another world in the fragrant house. There were often people who hid their appearances who entered and never appeared again. If Ling Zhao guessed correctly, this should be the place where the Realm Lord Palace trained the death servants. Master, seeing the figure descending from the sky, Han Zhan and the others immediately bowed. At this moment, Ling Zhao's gaze landed on Luo Yin, who was tied up in the array. From the beginning to the end, Gu Chaoxiai did not ask about Luo Yan's whereabouts. Based on her understanding of Ling Zhao, such a traitor would not have a good ending. Although Gu Chaoxiai had some feelings for Luo Yin, she did not dare to interfere in such a matter. In the battle for the sovereign realm, even the slightest hesitation could ruin the entire game. She believed that Ling Zhao would make the right choice, so she didn't even mention the name Luo Yin. Not bad, Ling Zhao said indifferently and walked in front of Luo Yin. With Han Zhan's understanding of spiritual materials and medicinal pills, it shouldn't be difficult to pry open the mouth of a person who couldn't commit suicide. In a short span of 2 days, Luo Yin no longer looked human. Her appearance was extremely miserable. Of course, Ling Zhao naturally did not have the slightest bit of pity for such traitors. However, he still wanted to see if Luo Yin was telling the truth. Once she deliberately revealed a flaw and lured Ling Zhao over, it might be the start of a new game. It was not that Ling Zhao had too many concerns, but an opponent like Xue Xian had to be careful. For example, Chun Changsho. When he entered the Lin family, he was only an emperor god. He had been loyal for more than 900 years. Who would have thought that he was a pawn? In chaotic times, the situation changed in an instant. Moreover, a villain was not protected by the heavenly Tao. She had to be extremely careful with her thoughts and actions. Master, she really doesn't know the identity of the person behind this. Han Zhan stood behind Ling Zhao and said in a low voice. In the past 2 days, he had tried countless methods to completely shatter this woman's Tao heart and mind. Even so, she still couldn't reveal a single person's name. From the looks of it, the Realm Lord Palace's methods were indeed brilliant. Not only could they make these damned servants willingly die, but they also had no worries. The only mistake the Realm Lord Palace made was that they had too much trust in the damned servants they had trained. For example, Luo Yan's flaw was seen through before the game started. She was forcefully captured and couldn't even commit suicide. Of course, if it was someone else, they might not be able to see through the scheme at all. However, Ling Zhao's temperament could not be measured by age at all. This caused Luo Yan to be completely unprepared, and her soul and spirit energy were completely sealed. Understand. Ling Zhao nodded slightly. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed Luo Yan's chin, lifting her face. Their eyes met. At this moment, Luo Yan's eyes were dim and lifeless, like a corpse. However, Ling Zhao's eyes suddenly bloomed with boundless soul light. His pupils were extremely red, and 2 crescent moons rose slowly. Suddenly, Luo Yan's face froze. The world in front of her seemed to fall into eternal darkness. In the Blood Moon Forbidden Zone, this eye technique didn't forcibly invade the soul's sea, so it wouldn't touch the seal in her soul. However, in this Blood Moon domain, it could stimulate a person's most primitive fear. Especially for a damned servant like Luo Yan, there must be a great shadow hidden in her heart. Luo Yan's expression was blank as she raised her eyes to look at the blood moon above her head. In the next moment, several figures suddenly walked out from the darkness. They held long whips in their hands and ruthlessly whipped her body. Ah! A painful wail resounded. In a short moment, the clothes on Luo Yan's body had been whipped into pieces. Bloody scars appeared one after another. It was a shocking sight. However, those black-clothed and masked figures still didn't have any intention of stopping. They just kept waving the long whips in their hands until Luo Yan fainted. At this moment, this Sage Realm expert seemed to have forgotten her own strength. She was in a state of pure helplessness and fear. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was first tamed. For several days, those black-robed figures kept repeating the same thing. They waved their whips and fed her spiritual medicines. In the end, the expression on Luo Yan's face began to become numb. At this moment, another figure walked out from the darkness. She brought Luo Yan out from the darkness and saw the Black Mountain and Red River that Luo Yan spoke of. However, her fate still hadn't changed in the slightest. Merely this time around, she was no longer being whipped endlessly. Instead, she was serving all kinds of guests. Many years later, a smile blossomed on Luo Yan's face again. She was charming and shy. It was as if she had been reborn. Merely, the current her was no longer the fearful and stubborn innocent young girl from back then. Instead, she had become a chess piece in someone else's hand. On this day, she was brought back to the dark hall that had imprisoned her back then. Luo Yan's complexion turned pale with fear once again. The door to the hall was pushed open and a figure slowly walked in. In the end, a beautiful and charming face was revealed. The scene came to a stop. The blood moon disappeared. Ling Zhao stood before the Hall of Medicine with his hands behind his back. There were no ripples in his eyes. The path to immortality was cruel. Medicine slaves, sword slaves, and so on could be seen everywhere. In the end, in a world where the strong were revered, the so-called stability was extremely childish. The fate of the weak could be changed by the strong at any time. One might call this cruel, but this was the truth of the path to immortality. Give her a quick and painless death. Ling Zhao didn't even turn his head around. He raised his foot and walked toward the heavenly hall. However, right when his figure appeared before the heavenly hall, his eyes narrowed. Chapter 1404. Is it finally done? Ling Zhao stood in the heavenly palace and clenched his fist. Above his head, the void rippled with a loud rumble. Clouds gathered like a funnel that connected the heavens and the earth. Amidst the devilish clouds, an ancient blade that was coiled with boundless devilish intent slashed apart the sky and descended from the sky. Boom! The sky shattered in an instant, and the originally clear sky and earth suddenly fell into darkness. Only the devil blade stood tall in the sky, like a proud monarch overlooking the past of the mortal world. Ling Zhao had killed thousands of god emperors, honorables, and 9 saints in the lower realm. Their blood bones, and souls were great nourishment for the demonic blade. Therefore, he left the demonic blade in the lower realm when he crushed the image-preserving stone and left the realm of Hanyang. Now, the demonic blade was connected to Ling Zhao's mind. He only needed a thought for the demonic blade to return. As for the Lin family, they probably wanted to seal the realm of Hanyang and cut off all ties with him. The corners of Ling Zhao's mouth curled up into a smile. The moment he stepped out, his figure instantly appeared in front of the demonic blade. Then he grabbed it in his hand. Boom! The entire realm suddenly lit up with demonic light, illuminating the 9 heavens. At this moment, Ling Zhao's body seemed to be covered in thousands of demonic runes. Patches of primal chaos mist fell, as if it was the beginning of the primordial chaos, the beginning of the epic. Darkness covered the land, but there was a glimmer of light at the end of the darkness. It was a young man standing at the top of the sky. He looked up at the sky and shone as brightly as the sun and moon. In front of Ling Zhao's eyes, a golden mist suddenly rose. Then, the stars moved and the universe changed. His figure fell into a vast and ancient space. As far as the eye could see, it was a wasteland like a dead zone. At the end of the world, a purple curtain fell from the sky and tore the land apart. It suppressed the divine Tao. Terrifying residual power surged out, directly destroying mountains and rivers and evaporating rivers and rivers. Countless cracks spread for hundreds of millions of miles. The great Tao was destroyed. In the depths of the cracks, there was a fire burning. It was like the end of the world. Boom! Another terrifying explosion came from the end of the world. A second purple divine screen descended from the heavens, tearing the void apart and annihilating all living things. At this moment, Ling Zhao finally noticed that the enormous divine screen was actually a bolt of lightning. Too terrifying. Even with Ling Zhao's temperament, he still felt a wave of fear when he saw such a vast amount of lightning. If it weren't for the fact that he was only a wisp of soul awareness watching this tribulation from the sidelines, perhaps just a wisp of aura from the lightning would be enough to kill him on the spot. This kind of lightning could no longer be described as terrifying. It was billions of times stronger than the Saint Tribulation lightning. Ling Zhao simply couldn't imagine who in this world could withstand such a heavenly tribulation. Boom, boom, boom. After the 9 thunderous roars, the land was already riddled with holes, and there was no spiritual vigor left. Even the great Tao of the void was completely shattered by the lightning. However, at this moment, a stream of light suddenly flashed in the sky. A figure clad in golden robes stepped down from the sky, standing at the peak of the sky. His face was covered by a layer of golden mist, and his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. However, there was a 7-colored brilliance circulating in his eyes, which evolved into thousands of great Taos. He was like a god who created the world and created his own reincarnation. He lowered his head, looked at the end of the land, and suddenly reached out his palm. Boom! A river of stars suddenly appeared. An endless golden mist rose and fell one after another. A golden palm print seemed to encompass the heavens, and it evolved into an extremely powerful light that directly crushed the entire world. Ling Zhao's eyes turned cold. Even though he knew that everything in front of him was just a memory from the reincarnation demonic blade, he still trembled with fear and trepidation. This was the ultimate powerhouse who stood high above the 9 heavens, the ultimate powerhouse who controlled the world alone. This palm had already transcended the spiritual aura of the Tao. It was like the incarnation of the heavenly Tao, the origin of power. When the palm fell, the world was destroyed. A world of billions of miles of mountains and rivers was directly crushed into nothingness. Darkness spread, and vast stars floated. A vast aura separated the past from the present, and it was independent of the world. Buzz. However, at this moment, a loud and clear sound of a saber suddenly came from the nothingness. A ray of saber light slashed through the sea of stars and split the golden seal in half. Then, a figure appeared from the nothingness. His black hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. Although there was no aura on his body, he was like the source of darkness that swallowed the light just by standing there. Sky Demon. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. He finally understood who attracted the purple tribulation lightning just now. It turned out that it was the number 1 demon of the 9 heavens who was going through the tribulation. However, with his strength, what kind of tribulation was he going through? Inexplicably, Ling Xiao felt a little shocked, and he also felt that it was ridiculous. Everyone knew that above the Supremes were the great emperors, and above the great emperors were the immortals. However, Xionghuan said that there was no immortals in his era. Could it be that the immortals were actually the pinnacle of the human world? Perhaps this realm was just the beginning of another level. However, what puzzled Ling Xiao even more was that the Sky Demon deliberately chose such a desolate and secluded world to undergo the tribulation. Obviously, he was on guard. Given his temperament, it was impossible for him to let others take advantage of him. After all, no matter what kind of tribulation it was, the person undergoing the tribulation would have a 90% chance of survival. Even if he passed it safely in the end, he would definitely experience a long period of weakness. Therefore, the Sky Demon was probably hiding here to avoid the eyes and ears of the ancient gods of the immortals. However, in the end, the Golden Robe Man still found him. Did this mean that there was a traitor beside the Sky Demon? Moreover, now that he had opened the seal of the demonic blade step by step, what he saw was not a simple scene. It was more like the Sky Demon had predicted this and deliberately left behind the inheritance to teach him cultivation. Could it be that his reincarnation and rebirth was also part of the plan? For the first time, Ling Xiao felt a trace of fear. If everything was truly as he had expected, then he, or perhaps the owner of this physical body, had likely fallen into a chess game that concealed the 9 heavens from the moment he was born. However, was this chess game the Sky Demon's backup plan, or was it someone else's plan? There was no way to know. Ling Zhao's eyes were solemn, and his heart was filled with thoughts. He was getting more and more confused. It seemed that the deeper he went into this fog, the more treacherous it was. Look carefully. This move was created by me during the heavenly tribulation. It's called tribulation. The Sky Demon stood proudly in the void, holding the ancient reincarnation blade in his hand. He brazenly slashed toward the Golden Robe Man. Where I am, the immortals and gods are forbidden. Immemorial Heaven Destroyer. 6th move, tribulation. Boom! As the Sky Demon's voice fell, an extremely powerful blade aura swept across the sky, tearing apart thousands of stars, and fell from the sky. Vaguely, a gigantic purple tribulation lightning fell from the sky, and together with the blade aura, it enveloped the Golden Robe Man. Heaven and earth were silent, and purple light filled the sky. The void was annihilated by this blade aura, which contained unparalleled destructive fluctuations. Chapter 1405. Rumble. In an instant, the 6 paths of heaven and earth and the samsara of life and death all collapsed. The world in front of Ling Xiao finally shattered the moment the blade slashed down. Punishing heaven, evil God, suppressing soul, unparalleled resentment, tribulation. 5 of the 9 moves of the immemorial era had been seen. However, Ling Xiao vaguely felt that his path of Tao had not truly begun. He lowered his head and looked at the demonic blade in his hand with a serious expression. Now it seemed that the Sky Demon most likely had a spy of the ancient god beside him. If that was the case, then his death could be explained. However, why did he leave behind the inheritance of the samsara, demonic blade? Was it a coincidence, or was it premeditated? Or did the Sky Demon already know that he would die? So he left behind this inheritance to teach his reincarnated self how to cultivate? Ling Xiao took a deep breath, and a trace of coldness gradually appeared in his eyes. No matter what kind of great secrets were hidden behind this layer of fog, it was a challenge for Ling Xiao. The person who could kill the Sky Demon must be a true expert of the 9 heavens. Or even, Ling Xiao suspected that the person who betrayed the sky demon back then was very likely still alive in this world. Therefore, in the end, whether he appeared in the world as the sky demon or as a chess piece, he would face endless danger. Moreover, if this reincarnation was only the sky demon's backup plan, then Ling Xiao's situation would be even more dangerous. In any case, reincarnation and rebirth should leave behind memories. However, the moment Ling Xiao transmigrated, he did not have any memories of the sky demon. It was undeniable that the Ling Xiao back then was too weak and had not awakened his true self. However, what if he was not the sky demon at all and had only inherited the sky demon's body? What would happen? A trace of coldness quietly spread. Ling Xiao held the demonic blade tightly and fell into a long silence. From the beginning until the end, he'd been working hard to walk a path that transcended the control of others. Whether it was subduing the son of destiny or the daughter of destiny, it was all for the sake of one day using their strength to fight against the immortals and even the heavenly Tao. After all, luck was a variable. Even an ancient god with the most terrifying cultivation could not replace the will of the great Tao. But now, Ling Xiao suddenly realized that this was far from enough. Previously, he had always been wary of the ancient gods of the immortals, but he firmly believed in the will of the sky demon. Regardless of whether it was the cultivation method he cultivated or the numinous treasure in his hands, they were all passed down from the sky demon. But today, the moment he saw the golden-robed man, Ling Xiao suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of danger. If he continued on the path before him, he might be able to reach the pinnacle of the world. However, at the end of the day, no matter how many backup plans he prepared, he could not be considered to have truly jumped out of this chessboard. External forces might be able to change the situation, but they would never be able to break free from it. Therefore, Ling Xiao's eyes were calm as his figure gradually disappeared. In the deity battlefield, the Xintian ancient battleship descended from the sky. Ling Xiao returned to the central divine mountain. After chatting with Xinyuan Weiyang for a while, he walked back into the main hall and disappeared. Calculating the time, there was still a little more than a month before the opening of the World of Souls. In the past few months, many ancient sects and hidden sects had suddenly appeared in the Azure continent. They were probably preparing for the opening of the immortal path. And the curtains of this chaotic world were gradually opening. People were looking forward to it. Tens of thousands of races went on an expedition. Chaos began, and Ling Xiao's goal had never been to control an ordinary realm in a human realm. He wanted to truly be the only one in the 9 heavens. The more leaks he lured, the faster he would grow. Buzz! The entire realm returned to peace, and Ling Xiao appeared at the border of the deity battlefield. Sir, 2 figures shuttled between the ancient mountains and dense forests. At this moment, Ning Chuan's face was clearly filled with excitement. The battle 2 days ago could be said to be the most satisfying battle of his life. The exhilaration of the slaughter made him unable to stop. Of course, if the opponent was a bit stronger, this feeling would be even more intense. Come with me to a place. In Ling Xiao's opinion, since the fragrant harmony brothel was so brazenly opened in Han City, there must be something else going on inside. One had to admit that this method of concealment was indeed brilliant. After all, no one would think that the Realm Lord's Palace's faction was related to the Fragrant Harmony Brothel. Moreover, the Fragrant Harmony Brothel was a mix of good and bad people. Every day, all kinds of people would enter and leave, and this could conceal their identities very well. Wonderful. Ling Xiao naturally couldn't compare with Ning Chuan's attainments in the Tao of Formations. This madman's talent in the Tao of Formations was very commendable. With him in the group, no matter what kind of formations and boundaries were hidden in the Fragrant Harmony Brothel, they couldn't escape his eyes. All right, Ning Chuan grinned, feeling his blood boil. His path to immortality was simply too perfect, studying formations and slaying gods and humans. Originally, in the Daotian Academy, although Ning Chuan was in seclusion all day to cultivate the god-slaying ancient formation, he lacked the opportunity to fight. Even when he sparred with his fellow disciples, he was afraid to use his full strength. But now, following behind the young master, not only did he have enough time to cultivate, he could also truly kill to prove his Tao heart when his Tao formations broke through. This kind of life was very comfortable. You'd better not do anything without my permission. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, especially when he saw the scarlet light in Ning Chuan's pure black eyes, which made his scalp tingle. At this time, Ning Chuan's cultivation had reached the peak of the Exalt realm, and even his providence had risen to 18,000. Looking at the current generation, his battle strength was enough to crush most of the geniuses of the ancient sections. Yes, young master. Ning Chuan slightly restrained himself, and the smile on his face was pure, without a trace of killing intent. In the square of the Realm Lord's palace, Shuexian stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the sky. Behind him, Lu Xinghe lowered his head slightly, not saying a word. He had seen the battle in the realm of Hanyang. As he had expected, Ling Xiao had appeared in the lower realm and killed countless people. In fact, now, the young master of the Ling people was so powerful that he could kill a saint with a wave of his hand. One had to know that in the Azure realm, the saint realm was already the peak of the clan if there were no supremes. Although there were many monsters in the current chaotic world, those who could kill a saint realm cultivator in the current generation were all true geniuses. Of course, the Saint Ling Xiao killed was only a false saint, but even so, it was still shocking. One had to know that the young master of the Ling people had only been born for a year. The last time Shuexian saw him, he was only a beginner in the Exalt realm. He killed a saint in a year. If his cultivation had really entered the saint realm, he would be a threat to Shuexian. However, it was only a threat, because his trump card was never the immortal demon Ancient Bell that the world knew about. As long as he could enter the Supremes, no one in the world would be a match for him. Young master, Gu Chao Ci has returned to the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty, and the young master of the Ling people has returned to the Ling people. Lu Xinghe sighed softly and looked at the immortal-like figure in front of him. Many times, he was in a daze, as if the person standing in front of him was not the young master, but the real Realm Lord. The transcendent calmness of not fearing the collapse of the world was too similar. It was as if everything in the world was under his control, and nothing could surprise him. Chapter 1406. Oh, I got it. Shuexian nodded without looking back. He had expected that Gu Chao Ci and Ling Xiao would not be killed by a group of fake saints. However, the strength displayed by the two of them still surprised him. This was especially true for Gu Chaozi, who had fought against 10,000 people alone. Although she had used up all her spirit energy and almost died, she had been saved by Ling Xiao at the critical moment. What surprised Shuexian even more was that her injuries were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Shuexian had heard that Gu Chaozi had comprehended chaos and was endowed with eternal talent. He did not expect her to be so strong. It seemed that in less than 100 years, these two would become the biggest stumbling blocks on his path to immortality. Young master, Ling Xiao killed a paragon of the Lin family yesterday. Should we send someone to rope in the Lin family? Lu Xinghe's eyes were deep. In his opinion, the Lin family must hate Ling Xiao and the Ling people to the core. In this way, the Realm Lord's palace only needed to show a little friendliness, and the Lin family would immediately submit. No need, however, to Lu Xinghe's surprise, Shuexian only shook his head and did not say anything. Elder Lu, has there been any movement in the Far East Ghost region? No, Lu Xinghe said in a low voice with some confusion in his eyes. He had a feeling that the young master was paying closer attention to the Far East than to the Ling people. However, when the Ghost Emperor died, the entire Far East was sealed by the Realm Lord. What was the young master worried about? Send a group of World Divine Guards to stand guard around the deity battle region. Once they find Ling Xiao, report immediately. Shuexian said indifferently, but he sighed softly in his heart. Ling Xiao killed the paragon of the Lin family and escorted Gu Chaozi back to the immortal Phoenix. Today, he returned to the Ling people openly. No matter how one looked at it, the young master of the Ling people seemed to be venting his anger on the Lin family. However, with Ling Zhao's scheming, he did not even need to think to guess that this matter was definitely the work of the Realm Lord Palace. His actions were truly a bit too cautious. Deity Battle Domain? Lu Xinghe was stunned again, but he didn't ask any more questions. He immediately turned around and left. Ghost Clan, you're quite patient. Xue Xian's eyes were cold and inexplicably deep. On the other side, Ling Xiao and Ning Chuan quietly left the Divine Battle Domain. They concealed their appearances and headed north. Along the way, there were cultivators from various sects chasing after them. It was extremely chaotic. Ling Xiao had also heard of the few secret clans, evildoers who had appeared recently. However, their appearance would only cause the situation in Azure Heaven to suddenly become complicated and chaotic. Hence, Ling Xiao was not in a hurry to kill them. When the world of souls opened, it would definitely attract many geniuses to go down to the lower worlds to search for treasures. At that time, what awaited them would be the trial of justice. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. As the matter of the Lin family spread, the world's fear of Gu Chaoxiai deepened. It was not only because of the Empress's Saint Realm cultivation, but also because of Lord Ling Xiao who stood behind her. When a young master was angry, an entire realm would be slaughtered. Even the Lin family could only offer up their spiritual treasure and the life of a supreme being to appease his anger. In Azure Heaven, supreme being cultivators were the foundation of a faction, no matter which sect it was. However, in front of the young master, they could only be sacrificed. They had no dignity and were no different from livestock. Young master, come and play. Oh, sir, come in and sit. Hanzhan City. This ancient city was located in the northeast of Azure Heaven. It was named after Hanzhan. However, the weather in this city was much colder than the other regions, but it was extremely lively. As for the reason, it was in this ancient building with red silk hanging in front of them. Fragrant Fragrance Building. This building was publicly recognized as the best fragrant pavilion in Azure Heaven. The women in it were alluring and charming, but each had their own unique characteristics that made people forget to leave. At this time, Ling Xiao was walking in front of the Fragrant Fragrance Building with his hands behind his back. His face was covered by the clouds, and his eyes were bright. Behind him, Ning Chuan crossed his arms and looked like he had nothing left to live for. At first, he thought that Ling Xiao was going to take him to kill and train his Taoist heart. He did not expect this young master to come all the way here for a brothel. It was ridiculous. Oh, young master, when I saw you, I was so happy that I wanted to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk with you. At this time, a few young women suddenly walked out of the Fragrant Fragrance Building and surrounded Ling Xiao and Ning Chuan. Their eyes rippled with charm. Although Ling Xiao had yet to reveal his true appearance, his aura was far too noble and aloof. A young master like him must be a descendant of a holy sect from a big clan. He must be rich. Of course, visiting the Fragrant Fragrance Building was not something to be proud of. Therefore, many descendants and young masters of high status often came with their faces hidden to save some face. Are you sure you're sitting properly? Ling Xiao smiled and spoke in a frivolous tone, just like a hedonistic son of a wealthy family. Ha ha ha. Of course we're doing it properly. With young master status, how would we dare to be perfunctory? We will definitely satisfy young master. Ha 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 ha. I like women like you who say one thing and mean another. Ling Xiao grinned and walked into the building. Behind him, the women of the Fragrant Fragrance Building exchanged glances and followed. After all, a noble young master could not only bring a considerable income to the Fragrant Fragrance Building, but also bring a lot of useful information. Young master, this way please. In the end, Ling Xiao and Ling Xiao were led to a private room. The flirtatious women then turned around and left. Ha ha ha, I heard we have guests. I was wondering why I heard the sound of magpies this morning. When the door was pushed open again, a beautiful woman wearing an embroidered gold robe walked in. She bowed before Ling Xiao respectfully. Behind him, a group of maidservants brought in food, wine, and spirit soup, and then retreated. Young master, what are you trying to do today? The beautiful woman personally poured Ling Xiao a cup and stared at Ning Chuan strangely. Just then, the number one genius from the array division had a dark expression on his face. He stood behind Ling Xiao and did not speak a word. However, there was an invisible amount of killer's intent that prevented others from getting close to him. It was hard to imagine how a young man of the untainted realm could make her, a powerhouse of the holy realm, feel oppressed. As for his identity, it seemed that he was only a servant of this black-clothed young master. Didn't that mean? Haha, do not worry, young master. The Fragrant Fragrance building has its own rules. We will not expose any of our guests' privacy. Therefore, you do not need to worry about me. The woman in gold spoke casually. She appeared to be reminding Ling Xiao casually, but in reality, she wanted to make Ling Xiao look away and see his face. Chapter 1407. Oh, I heard that there are women from various races in your fragrant harmony brothel. Ling Xiao picked up his wine glass and took a sip, completely unmoved. From a moment the golden-robed woman walked into the room, he knew he had made the right choice. This was the mysterious woman who had appeared in Luo Yan's memory. 7th-level sage realm, but deliberately concealed her cultivation. If not for Ling Xiao's powerful divine soul, it would have been difficult to see her true strength. Yes, I can only say, there are only women in my fragrant harmony brothel that young master can't think of. The golden-robed woman smiled seductively. Holding the wine pot, she kept refilling Ling Xiao's wine. Oh, then I wonder if there are any women from the divine feather race in your fragrant harmony brothel? Ling Xiao smiled playfully, but the beautiful woman's face suddenly froze. She smiled bitterly and said, "Young master is joking. The divine feather race is an overlord race in the extreme south. They haven't come out for a long time. How could they come to my fragrant harmony brothel to make a living? Oh, then what kind of women do you have here?" Ling Xiao shook his head, his tone somewhat disappointed. "I want clean bodies. What this young master doesn't lack the least is spirit stones." With that, Ling Xiao took out a chinquin pouch and casually poured it on the ground. Instantly, piles of spirit stones covered the ground beneath his feet, emitting dense spirit light. This, of course. With young master status, of course you want clean bodies. Young master came at the right time. A group of women from the demon race just came to my fragrant harmony brothel. I'll call them up for you. The golden-robed woman's eyes trembled, and the smile on her face became more and more brilliant. But the moment she walked out of the room, Ling Xiao's face suddenly showed a trace of killing intent. The reason he wanted to find women from the demon race was naturally not to rush. This kind of vulgar rouge simply couldn't enter his eyes. Their bodies were clean, which proved that they had just been tamed. The demon race had always been hot-tempered. Even if they were forced to submit, they would hide their unwillingness in their hearts. In a moment, I'll send you away. You go and see if there are any hidden spirit arrays in this fragrant fragrance pavilion. Ling Xiao's eyes flickered with a wisp of soul light, while Ning Chuan's expression quietly turned cold, and the corners of his mouth actually revealed a rare arc. Sure enough, there was a problem with this fragrant fragrance restaurant. Yes, young master, the ladies are here. It was only when a series of footsteps suddenly sounded from afar that Ling Xiao's eyes once again revealed a frivolous smile. The door opened, and one after another, graceful and enchanting figures walked in. Their clothes were translucent, and they were extremely alluring. The appearances of these women were slightly different from those of the human race. Some had horns on their heads, some had fiery red tails, some had slender ears, and some had scales between their eyebrows. In short, there are all kinds of strange things that had a unique flavor. Ling Xiao's eyes swept past these women one by one and finally stopped on a woman with white, red hair and a fiery red foxtail. "What's your name?" Ling Xiao's eyes unscrupulously sized up the woman in front of him. He lifted his foot and walked in front of her, gently pinching her chin and raising her face. This woman was the only one among them who had her head lowered and never looked at him. Moreover, there was a slender scar on the inside of her arm. Although it had already healed, it was still shocking to see. It was obvious that this woman had just been tamed and had suffered enough. Most importantly, there was a trace of fortune on this woman's body. There was a total of 300, but it was also different from the rest. My name is Chili. The red-haired woman's eyes dodged, not daring to look at Ling Xiao at all. Chili, I'll choose you. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao pulled her into his arms and sat back down at the table. Young master. Cough, cough, since young master has taken a fancy to you, you should obediently serve young master here. If you dare to make young master unhappy, you know the consequences. The golden-robed woman snorted and looked at Ling Xiao with a flattering face. Young master, play freely. If you're happy, you can take her away. Hee. Then I won't disturb young master anymore. Wait a minute. Ling Xiao held Huoli in one hand and the wine cup in the other. He raised his head and drank. Young master, do you have any other orders? Wu Chuan, you don't like anyone. Ling Xiao looked at Ning Chuan meaningfully. The latter immediately understood and shook his head slightly. I don't dare to be interested in women of the demon clan. The smell is too strong. Ha, this dog slave of mine has some weird fetishes. How about this, you go out and walk around. If you meet a suitable girl, young master will buy her for you. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He waved his hand casually. You can leave. Thank you, young master. The corner of Ning Chuan's eyes twitched. In the end, he bowed and walked out of the room with the golden-robed woman. Suddenly, Ling Xiao could clearly feel that Qi Li's delicate body was tense. She was obviously nervous. Qi Li, you should be from the extreme South Crimson Fox clan, right? Ling Xiao asked casually. Today, he came to the Fragrant Fragrance House to find out who was hiding behind this Fragrant Fragrance House. From Luo Yan's memory, this should be the place where the death servants were trained. It had existed for a very long time and established a complete and smooth intelligence order. From training the death servants to sending them to the major sects in the Azure continent, it was not something that could be done overnight. And today, as long as Ling Xiao uprooted this place, this intelligence force would be completely paralyzed, and it would be impossible to re-establish it in a short period of time. Replying, Young master. Chili sat uneasily on Ling Xiao's lap. Her head was lowered, and the tips of her ears were red. It had to be said that this fox girl, no matter what bloodline she had, was born with an enchanting appearance. Even if Qi Li's temperament was simple, her pair of fox eyes were still blurred and seductive, making people fall head over heels for her. Looking closely, there were some brown spots on her cheeks, which added a bit of playfulness. The Crimson Fox clan should be a vassal of the Celestial Wolf clan. I heard that Sangin of the Celestial Wolf clan killed the young master of the Thunder Dragon clan. Now, the vassal clans like you must be having a hard time, right? At this time, Ling Xiao was not in a hurry. There were restrictions in the soul seas of these death servants, which would break with a touch. The best way was to ask them to take the initiative to tell the secret hidden in the Fragrant Fragrance House. Ning Chuan had just gone out. Ling Xiao still needed to wait for him to find out the location of the array before he could destroy the darkness with a thunderous force. For a place like the Fragrant Fragrance House, if there was a secret hidden, there must be an array to cover it. And to break the array, we are professionals. My clan has been expelled by the Celestial Wolf clan, but the Thunder Dragon clan still has no intention of letting us go. Qi Li's eyes rippled, and a rare trace of sadness appeared on her pretty face. The Crimson Fox clan was no longer the upstart of the demon domain when Qi Ji controlled the Celestial Wolf clan. Not only were they killed by the Celestial Wolf clan, but they were now regarded as traitors by the Thunder Dragon clan. If not for that, she would not have been captured and sent to the Fragrant Harmony brothel. Oh, I have some friendship with the current young master of the Thunder Dragon clan. Ling Xiao suddenly grinned, his eyes deep and greedy. Qi Li's pretty face froze. After a long silence, she suddenly raised her hand and untied the red rope around her neck. Instantly, her light robe slid down, magnificent and magnificent. It was as if a shocking painting was suddenly revealed in front of Ling Xiao. Chapter 1408. Young Master, I will serve you. Please rest. Qi Liu blushed, but her eyes flickered with a hint of determination. Now that she was trapped, it was impossible for her to break free. She could only hope that this mysterious young master would protect the Crimson Fox tribe because of this relationship. Then, her body would not be in vain. Everyone knew that the Fox tribe was seductive and seductive, but they did not know that the women of this tribe were mostly loyal and steadfast. They would never cross the line when it came to love. However, to Qi Li's surprise, Ling Xiao just shook his head. His eyes were gentle and even a little playful, but there was no trace of lust. Young master. Qi Li was stunned. She suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Not only do I have a good relationship with the young master of the Thunder Dragon tribe, but I also have a very close relationship with the Divine Feather tribe. I can protect the Crimson Fox tribe. I can even bring you out of here. Ling Xiao picked up the wine cup and took a sip. His tone was extremely gentle. What? Young master. For a moment, Qi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of expectation, but soon it dimmed again. She shook her head slightly with a sad expression. Young master, I won't. If you can protect the Crimson Fox tribe, I will be satisfied. Oh, Miss Qi Li, you seem to have some concerns. Why don't you tell me? The light in Ling Xiao's eyes dimmed. The immortal glow on his face suddenly disappeared, revealing his incomparably handsome face. Gulp. Even with Qi Li's state of mind, she was stunned. She had never seen such a handsome young master. He was otherworldly, like a flawless piece of jade, gentle and sparkling. Lingmi? Then, Qi Li's eyes widened. A trace of disbelief appeared on her face. In the entire Azure continent, there was only one tribe with the surname Ling. Even if she had never been out of the extreme south, she knew the terrifying background of this tribe. It was said that this was the only ancient tribe that the Realm Lord feared. It was far more terrifying than the Ghost Emperor of the Extreme East, the Undying Demon King, and the Barbarian King of the Extreme North. Young master, you are. My name is Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. The moment the golden-robed woman left the room, he had already set up the ancient universe formation to isolate the soul awareness of others. Moreover, he didn't conceal it all. In a place like this, concealing one's identity was nothing to be surprised about. After all, not everyone liked to be watched by others when they were arranging flowers and playing with jade. Ling Xiao. Qi Li covered her mouth, and her fiery red pupils suddenly shrank. Under this continuous shock, she completely forgot that she was still naked at this moment, and in a relatively ambiguous position, she sat in Ling Xiao's arms. So you can be at ease. I will definitely do what I say. Currently, in the Azure Sky world, the words Lord Ling Xiao had already become a golden signboard. A righteous genius who even dared to kill the sky demon. What other demons in this world could be worthy of his fear? But, Qi Li clenched her silver teeth as if she was in a dilemma. When she was brought here, she suffered inhumane torture. Not only was her Tao heart shattered, even her mind was broken by the whipping again and again. Now that she finally saw the light again, she was afraid that if she made a mistake, she would return to that dark time. At this moment, Ling Xiao was not in a hurry. He just slowly filled his wine cup and drank. If Qi Li didn't trust him today, she wouldn't trust anyone else. The atmosphere gradually became tense. After a long while, Qi Li turned to look at Ling Xiao. This time, there was no trace of avoidance in her eyes. Instead, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. Young master, can I trust you? Of course. Other than me, no one in the Azure continent can save you. Ling Xiao put down his wine cup and smiled freely. Qi Li didn't doubt this. After all, only the Taigu Ling people dared to oppose the World Lord Palace. Young master, can you really protect the Crimson Fox race? Hearing this, Ling Xiao didn't say anything. Instead, he took out a bright golden talisman from his interspatial ring. Lei Yan, young master. Soon, a surprised and gentle female voice came from the other side of the voice transmission talisman. A trace of shock appeared on Qi Li's face. Lei Yan's name had been like thunder in the demon realm for the past year. Not only was this woman extremely beautiful, but she was even more beautiful than Lei Yan. More importantly, it was said that she had received the inheritance of the Thunder Dragon Patriarch, and her bloodline was extremely terrifying. You know the Crimson Fox race, right? To Ling Xiao, protecting a puny little demon was just a matter of saying a word. Only by helping Qi Li solve her worries could she risk her life to help him. A gentleman would die for a bosom friend. Think about this carefully. A bosom friend wouldn't let you die of your own accord. Young master, I am now at the border of the Celestial Wolf race's territory. Do you want me to destroy the Crimson Fox race? No, you go find their race leader. Ling Xiao lowered his head and glanced at Qi Li. Yes, young master. At this moment, Qi Li was clearly a little excited. Ever since she was captured and brought here a year ago, she had been worried about the safety of her race. Back then, the Thunder Dragon race had come and killed countless Celestial Wolf race's vassals. Now, it seemed that the Crimson Fox race hadn't been implicated. Soon, the voice transmission talisman in Ling Xiao's hand lit up again, and Ziyan's voice came again. Young master. At this moment, since Ling Xiao called her Lei Yan, it was obvious that there was someone else beside him. Therefore, Ziyan's tone was extremely respectful, without the playfulness of the past. The race leader of the Crimson Fox race is here. Ling Xiao casually handed the voice transmission talisman to Qi Li. For a girl who had encountered such a situation, nothing could make her lower her guard and worry more than the voice of her race. The race leader of the Crimson Fox race, Qi Jing, greets young master. Mother. Qi Li's eyes rippled, and tears almost instantly appeared in her eyes. You are Leah? Leah, where are you? Mother. Qi Li pursed her red lips tightly, trying her best not to cry out loud. Mother, I'm fine. Don't worry, I'm with young master now. Oh, it's good that you're fine. It's good that you're fine. Lei Yan, bring the Crimson Fox race to the Thunder Dragon race's territory. I don't want them to suffer any harm. Ling Xiao said indifferently, and the clan master of the Crimson Fox race had already exclaimed from the other side of the voice transmission talisman. Thank you, young master. Thank you, young master Lei Yan. Thank you, young master. Now, can you believe me? Ling Xiao smiled and kept the voice transmission talisman into his universal ring. He lowered his head and looked at the girl in his arms. Qi Li immediately nodded, and there was no longer a trace of hesitation on her face. Originally, her only concern was that if she did something wrong, it would implicate the entire Crimson Fox race. But now, since Lord Ling Xiao had already erased her worries, she naturally didn't dare to hide anything. Tell me, what secret is hidden behind this fragrant fragrance restaurant? Chapter 1409. Young master, behind the fragrant house is a place to train spies and death servants. I don't know which force it is, but it's a big deal. Qi Li looked serious, but she was still a little scared. Is that place in the fragrant house? Ling Xiao already knew about this. He tried so hard to win Qi Li over because he wanted to find out where this place was hidden and what it could do in the future. Ling Xiao could gain her trust, and those girls who were in the same situation as her would trust him more. I don't know, but there must be a special passage between this place and the fragrant house. Every time we were brought in, our 6 senses were blocked, and we could vaguely feel the fluctuations of the array. Qi Li frowned, trying to recall more details. Oh, by the way, young master, Lu Yinyan is the commander in charge of training us. She's the golden-robed woman who came in first. Are there any other experts here? A Saint Realm expert was no threat to Ling Xiao. However, the Realm Lord Palace would definitely send someone to guard such an important place. There's another commander whose cultivation is even stronger than Lu Yinyan. We usually call him Lord Sha. Can you feel his cultivation level? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. Someone stronger than Lu Yinyin must be at the sovereign realm. However, according to Ling Xiao's guess, Lord Sha's strength was at most at the earthly sovereign realm. It should be noted that experts who had reached the heavenly sovereign realm rarely showed themselves. Instead, they stayed in seclusion to comprehend the great Tao and seek immortality. I don't know. Qili lowered her head guiltily. The next moment, she was stunned. She suddenly realized that she had been sitting naked in young master's arms all this time. I see. Ling Xiao pondered, not paying attention to the embarrassment on Qili's face. Now it seemed that as long as Ning Chuan found the passage, he could enter it and completely eliminate the intelligence force that belonged to the Realm Lord Palace. As for the spies that had been scattered earlier, since the commander was dead, their identities would be buried and they would be dead. At this moment, in a fragrant fragrance pavilion, Ning Chuan casually shuttled through the crowd, carefully examining every corner of the building. However, behind him, Lu Yinyin was always following him with a flattering smile on her face. I'll walk around by myself. You don't have to follow me. Ning Chuan frowned slightly, as if he was a little impatient. Haha, young master must be joking. With your status, how could this servant dare to slight you in the slightest? Young master, feel free to look around, feel free to pick. As long as young master takes a fancy to it, this servant will definitely arrange it for young master. Lu Yinyin smiled charmingly. Her tone was extremely humble. Although Ling Xiao's status was noble and he was generous and rich, such a person's background was definitely not ordinary. She wasn't stupid enough to let her guard down for mere spirit stones. However, the reason why the Child of Destiny was called the Child of Destiny was that no matter where they went, they would be protected by the Child of Destiny. Whether it was an accident or a coincidence, when they encountered trouble, there would always be a sudden situation that would help them solve their problems. At this moment, in a private room on the second floor, a gorgeously dressed and beautiful woman was carefully changing the clothes of a young master in front of her. Young Master Su, you just came today. Ayu has been waiting for you the whole morning. Yes, I was delayed by something. The young master's face was pale and his eyes were dark. At first glance, one could tell that he was a person who indulged in debauchery. However, his aura wasn't weak. At the 7th level of the Venerable Realm, it was slightly weak. Haha, when did young master leave last night? You didn't even say goodbye to Ayu. Young master, you don't know, but there was a big joke in the fragrant house yesterday. Ayu covered her mouth and chuckled, swaying her body gracefully. A young master drank too much and fell into the latrine. It took an hour to get him out. All the guests in the fragrant house went to see him, but young master was the only one who didn't. Why do you think I didn't go? The young Master Su's face suddenly darkened. Even his voice was filled with coldness. Ayu's hand that was stroking his shoulder quietly stopped. Her eyes trembled slightly, and she leaned over to Wretch. You be Astra's Tisich. How dare you humiliate me? The young Master Su shouted coldly and raised his hand to slap Ayu's face. With his cultivation at the Exalt realm and his fury at this moment, he actually slapped the woman flying. She smashed through the door and fell into the hall. Xiaoyu. In an instant, the entire hall was in chaos. Even Lu Yinyin turned her head in surprise. Her face suddenly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you humiliate me? Believe it or not, I'll smash you to death with spirit stones. Then the young Master Su stepped out. His upper body was naked, and he said fiercely, Ha, young Master Su, or why are you so angry? Lu Yinyin pushed through the crowd and walked to Xiaoyu, whose face was swollen and blood was spitting out. Killing intent flowed in her eyes, but she still had a seductive smile on her face. Don't you know who I am? I'm the young master of the Su family of the Heavenly Saint Merchant Alliance. You be Astra's cheese. How dare you humiliate me? Su shouted angrily. Behind him, 2 middle-aged men immediately walked up. Their saint aura was fluctuating around them. They were obviously his protectors. Ha, what are you talking about, young Master Su? How dare we humiliate you? Get out of here. I'll deal with you later. Lu Yinyun frowned slightly, but she didn't dare to fight with Su'er in front of him. The Heavenly Saint Business Alliance was the richest force in the Qing Tsang continent. She didn't want to fall out with the young master of the Su family because of a few curses. "Young master, you've dirtied your hand by hitting her. Come, I'll personally pour wine to apologize to you." In the end, under the push of Lu Yinyun, Su returned to his room impatiently. Ning Chuan took the opportunity to walk to the back hall of the Fragrant Harmony House. With his talent in the array Dao, he could easily sense a trace of array formation fluctuation there. Although the formation Dao was hidden very mysteriously, it was still full of flaws for a formation Dao madman who was born with formation eyes. When Ning Chuan arrived at the back hall of the Fragrant Harmony House, he saw several venerables guarding there. It was heavily guarded. The more it was so, the more certain Ning Chuan was that there must be a secret hidden in the back hall. A wisp of formation rune appeared out of thin air. Wherever Ning Chuan's gaze landed, the void trembled quietly. Then thousands of formation runes flowed and connected. Like a sea of stars, they directly enveloped the several venerables. On their faces, a bewildered and intoxicated expression immediately appeared on their faces. An illusory formation was one of the most common formations in the world. This one was the most famous illusory formation among the 72 ultimate formations of the ancient times. It was called the Heavenly Cycle of Stars. With Ning Chuan's cultivation, it was naturally easy for him to deal with a few venerables. After doing this, Ning Chuan didn't hesitate anymore and walked into the back hall. Chapter 14:10. Buzz. As the door of the hall was pushed open, Ning Chuan could feel a mysterious formation gathering around him. The world in front of him immediately turned dark and kept changing. An illusory formation? Ning Chuan smiled disdainfully. Obviously, someone had set up an illusory formation in the hall to prevent intruders. But for Ning Chuan, how many formations in the world could stop him? Suddenly, a dim light flashed in his eyes. It was like a black hole of time and black snow falling down. In an instant, the void cracked and the formation buzzed. The world in front of him changed again and turned into a pitch-black ancient hall. It gave people a gloomy and oppressive feeling. In the center of the hall, a formation passage stood quietly. It was like a whirlpool of stars, spinning and buzzing as if it was connected to another realm. "Master, I found it." Ning Chuan took out a message transmission talisman and said softly. But as soon as he finished speaking, the door behind him opened again. He saw Lu Yinyun and 4 other beautiful women walking towards him. Their faces were cold and gloomy. "Who the hell are you?" Lu Yinyun didn't hide the killing intent in her eyes at all. Ning Chuan slowly turned around with a strange smile on his face. "Humph! What trick?" Lu Yinyun narrowed her eyes and felt a little uneasy. The moment she saw Ling Xiao and Ning Chuan, she felt an inexplicable pressure. It was as if there was something in the 2 young men in front of her that made her afraid. Now it seemed that her premonition was right. There was a formation set up by Elder Shah in the hall. Not to mention an exalted realm cultivator. Even a saint realm cultivator would be fascinated by it. To tame the spies and train the death servants, not only to break their Taoist heart and dignity, but also to rebuild their faith. And Elder Shah's method was an illusory formation. In the illusory formation, he was the only god, and all living beings could only bow down to him. Even Lu Yinyun was extremely afraid of Elder Shah. But the young man in front of her could break Elder Shah's illusory formation with his exalted realm cultivation. This kind of talent was indeed frightening. "Kill!" Lu Yinyun shouted coldly. The 4 beautiful girls beside her immediately rushed out and surrounded Ning Chuan. However, just as their figures appeared about 10 feet in front of Ning Chuan, a wisp of horror appeared on their faces. At this moment, an ancient and mysterious blood-red formation stood towering in the air above the hall, and it floated there silently. Bloody runes circled around it, surging with a terrifying aura that could suppress the heavens and the earth. Furthermore, Every single one of them was powerful enough to kill exalted realm cultivators like them on the spot. Oomph. Do you really think that just because you have some talent, you can do whatever you want in my fragrant harmony house? Seeing this scene, Lu Yinyun's expression was also somewhat grave. She took a step forward, and before the blood formation smashed down, she raised her hand and struck out with her palm. Spiritual radiance surged, and a palm print shot up. Divine might swirled around it, and it was covered with all kinds of ancient and complicated patterns. As soon as this aura appeared, the entire void exploded. The blood-colored ancient formation immediately stopped in the void and began to wear down the palm print. But in the end, countless cracks still appeared, and it turned into a bloody wave and dissipated. With Lu Yinyun's strength at the 7th level of the Saint Realm, it was obvious that Ning Chuan alone was no match for her. But even so, Lu Yinyun's face still showed a touch of absurdity. In her eyes, everyone below the Saint Realm was an ant. This was the common understanding of the Azure world. Moreover, with her cultivation at the 7th level of the Saint Realm and 2 Saint Runes, her spiritual energy alone was enough to crush people in the same realm. But the blood formation just now was able to stop her for a moment. Absurd. Suddenly, Lu Yinyun's face became gloomier. She could feel that the young man in front of her must have a great background. Even though the Azure world was full of geniuses, and even some of the hidden sects and forbidden lands had successors, anything unbelievable could happen in this era. The Azure world was still full of geniuses. But this was still too outrageous. Pucci. With the blood formation broken, Ning Chuan's feet suddenly trembled, and he staggered back a few steps, spilling blood from his mouth. But at this moment, there was still not a trace of panic on his face, and a sinister and strange smile suddenly appeared on his fair and delicate face. Then he stuck out his tongue, licked the blood at the corner of his mouth, and took a deep breath. This is really exciting. It feels like I haven't bled in a long time. Now that his cultivation had reached the peak of the Saint Realm, he was only one step away from breaking through to the Saint Realm. However, this step had troubled him for nearly half a year. It was not that Ning Chuan's talent was not enough. It was just that with his temperament, he could only forge a flawless Taoist foundation after experiencing enough killing. The Saint Realm he wanted was not as simple as 1 or 2 Saint Runes. Young man, I'll give you a chance. Tell me your background, and maybe you can work for the Fragrance Pavilion. Lu Yinyun stood with her hands behind her back and coldly looked at Ning Chuan, whose appearance and temperament were completely opposite. At this moment, she seemed to have sensed that under this young man's delicate and calm appearance, there seemed to be another face. Slaughter, endless slaughter. This temperament was frightening, but generally speaking, people with such temperament could eventually reach the top of the world and become an overlord or a demon lord. God Slayer, but Ning Chuan ignored Lu Yinyun's words. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the sprinkling blood. It was time. It was time to try to integrate the 10th ultimate formation into the God Slayer. A vast amount of blood energy swam around his body. His pure black eyes reflected the blood and bones of corpses. Endless ferocious power unrestrainedly spread out. If Lu Yinyun had not set up a formation outside the hall in advance to conceal his aura, this ferocious power alone would have caused the entire Han city to be in turmoil. Stubborn. Seeing the tens of thousands of runes rushing around the young man, even Lu Yinyun felt her heart palpitate. Beside him, the 4 young women had long since turned pale with fright. Their eyes were filled with terror, and there was also a trace of reverence. Especially Ning Chuan's appearance, which was handsome and elegant, gave people a feeling of friendliness. However, the strength and ferociousness he revealed were completely opposite to this. Wasn't he too mysterious? Wu Chuan. However, just as Lu Yinyun stepped forward and was about to stop Ning Chuan, a cold voice came from outside the hall again. Then, an elegant figure in black broke the ancient formation and appeared in front of Lu Yinyun and the others. There was a warm smile on his warm and radiant face. It's you? Chili, what are you doing? Seeing the red-haired girl beside Ling Xiao, Lu Yinyun's eyes suddenly narrowed. Even her body revealed an extreme, killing intent. You dare to betray me? Commander Lu, you don't have to be so angry. After all, you can't live today. Isn't it better to die with dignity? Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. Lu Yinyun suddenly stretched out her white hand and directly pressed toward Ling Xiao's head. Chapter 14:11. Buzz. A buzzing sound was heard in the hall. Holy will fell from Lu Yinyun's body. Her body emitted a terrifying golden light and a terrifying momentum that could suppress heaven and earth. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. There was no hesitation at all. No matter who was this young man in front of her. He probably came with ill intentions. There was nothing wrong with killing him. Lu Yinyun didn't know how the two of them broke the formation outside the hall so easily. However, she felt inexplicably uneasy. She felt that something big was about to happen. Boom! However, just as Lu Yinyun was thinking, the void in front of Ling Xiao suddenly rippled. Then, a vast demonic aura rushed into the sky. The entire hall fell into darkness. Lu Yinyun was startled. Just as she was about to stop and retreat, the void behind her rippled again. A huge fish shadow came out and crashed toward her back. Oh no! Lu Yinyun's expression changed. It was too late for her to dodge. She immediately gathered her spiritual power and turned it into an ancient realm, covering her figure. Crack! However, at the instant the fist landed, the ancient realm began to surge violently and cracks began to appear all over it. As for Lu Yinyun's figure, she was ruthlessly smashed into the demonic mist. Buzz! Immediately after, an ear-piercing sound of a saber suddenly resounded, accompanied by Lu Yinyun's painful howl. Gulp! In front of the hall, the four girls trembled. They didn't dare to move. They could feel that there was an extremely terrifying pressure where the demonic aura was surging. It wasn't something they could resist. Plop! Then, a low muffled sound came from the hall. The demonic aura in the sky quietly dissipated. The four girls saw Lu Yinyun's figure falling from the sky. There was a bloody wound on her chest, and her heart was cut into pieces. What was more frightening was that this 7th-level Saint Realm expert had bloodstains on her 7 orifices. Her eyes were wide open as if she saw great fear. However, there was still a trace of life left in her body. It wasn't that Ling Xiao was merciful, but he was worried that killing him would alert the enemy. After all, no one knew if Lord Sha had this person's soul plate. As the demonic fog dispersed, Ling Xiao stood in front of the hall with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were slightly gloomy. Sure Patian, Xiong Huan, and Brute Devil stood quietly in front of him with indifferent expressions on their faces. Their cultivation bases were all in the Saint Realm. Furthermore, with Ling Xiao's supply of medicinal pills, the 3 of them had made great breakthroughs in their cultivation during this 1 year. However, just as Ling Xiao had expected, there was also a restriction in Lu Yinyun's Sea of Soul, which was completely broken by a slight touch. It seemed that the answer to all the mysteries still lay with that. Lord Sha. Presently, the entire hall was enveloped by a formation, so Ling Xiao didn't have to worry about attracting too much attention. Plop! Looking at Lu Yinyun's miserable state, the 4 girls no longer dared to resist. With a plop sound, they collapsed on the ground. Their lips trembled slightly, but they couldn't make a sound. Send all of them into the medicine hall as formation pillars. Ling Xiao strode forward and arrived before the formation barrier that stood in the middle of the hall. He raised his hand and gently touched it. With a droning sound, a strand of surging divine energy actually came from within it. It blasted Ling Xiao's figure back by a few steps. Something is indeed strange. Ling Xiao smiled. He grasped Qi Li's jade-like hand and put Ning Chuan and the others into his realm. Then, he took out the boundary-breaking talisman and stepped into it. The universe was reversed, and the world was changing. When Ling Xiao and Qi Li landed on the ground, a dark and deep tunnel appeared in front of them. At the end of the tunnel, there seemed to be a light flickering. The two immediately concealed their auras and walked forward. Is this the place? Ling Xiao turned his head and looked at the girl beside him. At this moment, Qi Li's pretty face was pale, as if she was extremely afraid of this place. Yes, let's go and meet your Lord Sha. Ling Xiao smiled. Divine runes appeared in his eyes. The moment he stepped forward, his figure disappeared. No, no. At this moment, Ling Xiao didn't spread out a wisp of divine sense for fear of disturbing the experts hiding here. But gradually, he heard waves of painful wails, and most of them were from women. Finally, the two stepped through the darkness and appeared at the end of the tunnel. They saw an underground palace that looked like a cage. Inside it, black-clothed figures shuttled in an orderly manner. When they saw the two of them, everyone's footsteps paused, and a wisp of vigilance immediately appeared in their eyes. Qi, greetings, my lords. Qi pretended to be calm and bowed. This is a lord from above. Commander Liu asked me to bring him to meet Lord Sha. A lord from above. Everyone's expression changed, but the alert in their eyes didn't disappear. Seeing this, Ling Xiao immediately snorted and clenched his fist. An ancient bronze token immediately appeared. There were divine runes carved on it, and soul power filled it. The word shadow came into view. When Ling Xiao killed Qing Yang and Zhu Jie, he found an ancient token on each of them. The one he took out was none other than Zhu Jie's. After all, there was only one successor of Shadow Soul Hall. Qing Yang's death had been reported to the hall, but Zhu Jie, as a heavenly sovereign, must occupy an extremely important position in Shadow Soul Hall. Moreover, with Ling Xiao's understanding of this temple, this place was likely to belong to Shadow Soul Hall and not the Realm Master Hall. Hiding in the dark, searching for information, and assassinating traitors were all in line with Shadow Soul Hall style. More importantly, there were spiritual seals in the soul seas of these death servants. In the entire Qing Tsang, only Shadow Soul Hall had the ability to do this. This is seeing the divine token in Ling Xiao's hand. The black-robed men's faces were filled with surprise. Then, they knelt down in front of Qi Li's shocked eyes. Greetings, elder. Bring me to old Sha, Ling Xiao said indifferently. His eyes were clear, and there wasn't a trace of emotion. Hearing this, one of the middle-aged men immediately stood up and led Ling Xiao and Qi Li to the back of the hall. I am Yuan Feng. Greetings, Lord. May I know why you are here today? The black-robed man bowed and looked rather reserved. He naturally recognized the token in Ling Xiao's hand. It was the unique divine rune fluctuation of the heavenly sovereigns of Shadow Soul Hall. But looking at Ling Xiao's appearance, he was so young. Why would he come with such a token? Could it be that he was a disciple of an elder and had come here to train? Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Ling Xiao looked coldly at Yuan Feng. The soul rune in his eyes was like an abyss, causing Yuan Feng, who is also a saint, to turn pale. At this moment, he only felt that his entire soul sea was trembling as if it was about to shatter. It was obvious that the soul power of this lord had reached an appalling level. Yes, I deserve to die. The last trace of vigilance in Yuan Feng's heart disappeared, and he hurriedly walked forward. Chapter 14:12. Lord Sha, a young lord from the palace, has arrived. It was not until the three of them reached the depths of the underground palace that Yuan Feng stopped and bowed toward a black palace door. At this moment, Ling Xiao could feel that a wisp of soul consciousness suddenly spread out from behind the palace door and shrouded his figure. Obviously, this Lord Sha was also on guard and wanted to check his cultivation and identity. The reason why Ling Xiao did not immediately release the martial ancestor and the others was to hide his strength. There must be more than one entrance to such a shameful place. Once Lord Sha sensed their aura, he would probably choose to escape immediately. Now that Ling Xiao had integrated with Chu Liunyin's shadowless sacred body, he did not need to use the spiritual Bao Divine Talisman to hide his cultivation and aura. Therefore, when he sensed Ling Xiao's venerable realm fluctuation, a hoarse and old voice suddenly came from the palace. Come in. At this moment, In Lord Shah's opinion, it was impossible for a person in the venerable realm to step into this place without Lu Yinyan's guidance. He was still somewhat confident in his attainments and formations. Moreover, what trouble could a young man in the venerable realm cause? Ling Xiao turned his head and glanced at Qi Li, motioning for her to wait outside the palace. He then pushed open the palace door and walked in. At a glance, he saw the black-robed figure sitting upright in the palace. "Young man, show your true face and tell me your purpose of coming." Lord Shah's face was extremely thin, like a skeleton, and his eyes were deeply sunken. At this moment, although his body did not emit any fluctuation, Ling Zhao's soul perception still detected his cultivation as a fourth-grade earthly supreme. Sha Jing, the elder of Shadow Soul Hall, was good at formations and soul restriction, and had always been the owner of Fragrant Harmony House. Usually, he hid in the underground palace to train the damned servants, while Lu Yinyan was responsible for bringing the damned servants into Fragrant Harmony House to test their loyalty and ability. In the end, only the damned servants who met the requirements of the two would have the opportunity to be sent to the major sects and forces as spies. "Lord Shah, I have come here today to replace you and take charge of these damned servants." Ling Xiao smiled faintly. He walked up to Sha Jing and sat on the big chair opposite him. "Oh, I haven't received any orders from the palace master. Besides, I don't think you have the right to take over my position." Sha Jing shook his head. The soul light in his eyes was jumping, and his tone was somewhat sinister. "Lord Shah, you misunderstood me. I'm not negotiating with you. If you are willing to be my servant, perhaps you can continue to sit in this position. If you are not willing, then I can only kick you out." Ling Xiao raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Behind Sha Jing, a sovereign's aura suddenly covered him and directly crushed his body to the ground, making him almost unable to move. In front of a fifth-grade sky sovereign expert, an earthly prime was really too weak. "Pucci!" Sha Jing immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and the hatred in his eyes was shocking. "Ling Xiao, don't even think about it." "Very good. I like loyal people like Lord Shah the most." Ling Xiao stood up and walked to Sha Jing. Suddenly, a soul light lit up in his eyes, like a divine whirlpool, shrouding toward Sha Jing's soul sea. Seeing this scene, Sha Jing's first reaction was not fear, but surprise. Could it be that this young master of the Ling people is a fool? He actually wants to absorb my divine soul into his soul sea? Although the Shadow Soul Palace's divine soul techniques could not be compared to the ghost clans in the entire Azure world, there were only a few who dared to compete with their divine souls. Moreover, what was Ling Zhao's level? What was his level? Even if this young master of the Ling people was endlessly talented and had the ability to kill a saint, he was a sovereign. Could it be that Ling Xiao had become arrogant? Sha Jing's eyes were piercingly cold. At this time, there was no resistance at all. He directly cooperated and entered Ling Zhao's soul sea with his divine soul. However, what surprised Sha Jing was that this young man's soul sea was pitch black, and there was no trace of light at all. It was like a black hole in the universe, swallowing all the light. This, inexplicably, Sha Jing felt a little uneasy. Chapter 14:13. Buzz. Just as Sha Jing's eyes were solemn and he was on his guard, an ear-piercing buzz came from the end of his soul sea. Soon after, a pitch-black demonic sun rose into the sky. Its dark and deep light was vaguely reflected on a human figure. From afar, the figure seemed to be standing in the sky. The demonic sun rose and fell behind him. He was like the god of darkness of Ganala, looking down on everything. This is Sha Jing's body trembled. He instinctively felt a kind of fear, especially the light emitted by the demonic sun. When it shone on his body, there was a kind of chilling feeling. Furthermore, at this moment, Sha Jing actually felt that the power of his divine spirit was rapidly weakening at an extremely obvious speed. Buzz. It was only when the figure in the darkness stepped forward and appeared about 10 feet in front of him that Sha Jing realized that Ling Zhao's aura had also reached the level of an earthly sovereign. Above his head, an ancient divine talisman was quietly entrenched, releasing endless demonic intent. After devouring the darkness ancestral symbol, the absolute beginning divine talisman's power had recovered. The traces of demonic intent were vast and magnificent. It was like the extreme end of the world, the demonic origin in the depths of the nine heavens. It had nothing to do with one's cultivation level. It just made one tremble uncontrollably, and there was a kind of uneasiness that made one's mind collapse. How is this possible? At this moment, Sha Jing suddenly guessed many things. Currently, the Azure world seemed to be in turmoil. In reality, other than the Ling people, there was only the Sky Demon that could truly threaten the Realm Lord's rule. The Shadow Soul Palace's duty was to secretly clear all obstacles for the Realm Lord's palace. Although the Shadow Soul Palace Master did not submit to young Lord Shuexian, he was still loyal to the Realm Lord. In this year, the Shadow Soul Palace had been investigating the Sky Demon's whereabouts. Coincidentally, every time the Sky Demon appeared, the young Lord of the Ling people seemed to be able to appear at the crucial moment. However, his identity was that of the Righteous Path's outstanding talent who fought against the Sky Demon. Thus, it did not arouse any suspicion. However, at this moment, Sha Jing suddenly understood. Behind such a coincidence, it was very likely that there was a carefully arranged chess game. It was flawless, without the slightest flaw. Suddenly, Sha Jing felt a chill in his heart. Even the battle intent in his eyes froze. It's over. Barbecue is here. Lord Sha, I will ask you one last time. Are you willing to submit to me? Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, his expression indifferent. Sha Jing's submission would naturally bring him endless benefits. However, even if he didn't submit, the destruction of the fragrant restaurant would completely remove the fangs of the Shadow Soul Palace. As for those tamed death attendants and spies, Ling Xiao would naturally take them into his pocket without any hesitation. The Sky Demon has caused chaos in the nine heavens. Everyone has the right to punish him. Sha Jing gritted his teeth. He did not waver because of the Sky Demon's identity. Ling Xiao nodded and did not say anything else. The moment he stretched out his hand, the demonic sun above his head came crashing down. Boom, boom. The void immediately shattered, and a boundless demonic radiance poured down. A terrifying shadow almost covered heaven and earth. A torrential force that could suppress the universe came crashing down, causing Sha Jing's soul body to dissipate instantly. Ling Xiao, you will suffer retribution sooner or later. He raised both his hands to the sky, and his soul power surged, wanting to stop the demonic sun. However, the moment his palm collided with it, his soul power was swallowed by the demonic radiance and annihilated. Retribution? It seems that Lord Sha's retribution is me. Ling Xiao shook his head. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly turned cold. The moment he took a step forward, his figure suddenly appeared in front of Sha Jing. In his hand, a dagger that flickered with rainbow light was slashed horizontally, stabbing towards Sha Jing's glabella. At this moment, Sha Jing did not have any strength to resist at all. He could only hurriedly wave his palm to block in front of Ling Xiao. However, it was useless. The moment the Great Void Divine Dagger slashed down, it directly chopped off his attack along with his arm. In the end, the Great Void Divine Dagger flashed and pierced through Sha Jing's glabella. Buzz! Above the demonic sun, a vast demonic aura immediately exploded and swallowed Sha Jing's figure instantly. The entire soul sea regained its calmness again. Ling Zhao's eyes turned cold, and his divine sense returned to the main hall. He lowered his head to look at the corpse in front of him and suddenly clenched his fist, keeping it in his universe ring. Although Ling Xiao did not obtain any useful information from Lord Sha's soul consciousness, once this person died, the Shadow Soul Palace's tens of thousands of years of planning would be completely destroyed. In this way, the entire Realm Lord's Hall would be plunged into darkness, and all the spies would be annihilated. Ling Xiao would have enough time to uproot this force that had controlled the Azure world for 100,000 years. Calculating the time, the world of dead souls was about to appear. Who knew what kind of shocking secret was hidden in this lower realm this time? The door of the hall opened, and Ling Xiao's figure stepped out. Qi Li and Yuan Feng waited respectfully outside the hall and did not take a step out. My lord. The sound in the hall had been blocked by the array. However, the rumbling of the main hall still indicated that some unhappiness seemed to have erupted between this young lord and Lord Sha. Go and gather everyone. I have something to say, Ling Xiao said indifferently, and Yuan Feng did not dare to hesitate. He immediately turned and ran away. Soon, all the experts belonging to the Shadow Soul Palace and the Underground Palace gathered in the main hall. Ling Xiao signaled Yuan Feng to close the door of the hall, and his cold eyes swept across everyone. From today onwards, I will take over Lord Sha's position. My lord, where did Lord Sha go? One of the 9th-level Venerable Realm disciples of the Shadow Soul Palace frowned slightly and seemed to be puzzled. But the moment he finished speaking, he saw a soul light bloom in Ling Xiao's eyes. Then, a soul seal appeared out of thin air and fell from the sky with lightning speed, smashing his figure into minced meat. Didn't Sha Jing even teach you the rules? Ling Xiao's expression was calm, without the slightest ripple. The remaining dozens of Venerable Realm disciples immediately lowered their heads in fear and did not dare to disobey in the slightest. How many disciples of the Fragrant Fragrance Brothel are not here? My lord, there have been some changes in the Shadow Soul Palace recently. Almost all the disciples are in the Underground Palace and did not go out to hunt. Yuan Feng bowed and appeared to be very obedient. The new lord had appeared. If it did not suck up to him now, when would he? Although sucking up to him would leave him with nothing in the end, if he did not suck up to him, he would have nothing. Very good. Ling Xiao raised the corner of his mouth with a sinister smile, and suddenly lifted his foot to walk out of the hall. The crowd was startled. Clearly, they did not understand why that lord would suddenly leave. The moment Ling Xiao was about to walk out of the hall, the void behind him suddenly rippled. Then, 2 figures quietly appeared. One of them was a demonic shadow that was 10 feet tall, and the other was a handsome and gentle young man. Kill them all. After saying that, Ling Xiao did not hesitate anymore. He pushed open the door and walked out of the hall, turned around, and gently closed the door again. Boom! Chapter 14:14. Young Master. Qi stood outside the palace, her pretty face pale. Although she did not sense the fluctuations coming from the palace, she still heard what Ling Xiao said when he opened the door. Killed them all. It was obvious that Lord Sha, who controlled this underground palace and was regarded as a devil by everyone, had most likely died at the hands of young Master. In other words, she was free. Let's go and see those pitiful girls. Ling Xiao's eyes were solemn. He did not care about Ning Chuan and Qi Li in the palace and walked forward. With Xiong Huan around, even if Ning Chuan was not a match for some of the Saint Realm experts, his life would not be in danger. As for the disciples of Shadow Soul Palace, they were still chess pieces in the end. They were slaves under Sha Jing's control and were worthless. As for the girls who were trapped here and had not been completely tamed, Sha Jing had not set up a spirit restriction, so he could take them. Qi Li, go and let them out. I have something to say. Ling Xiao stood at the end of the tunnel with his hands behind his back, looking resentful. Qi Li nodded fiercely and walked quickly to the place where she had been imprisoned. Hesitant and slow footsteps were suddenly heard from the darkness in the distance. A cold light flashed in Ling Xiao's eyes, but the corners of his mouth curled into a gentle smile. The secret guards under Layer Shadow's control had all been killed in the Shangzhou battle. Ling Xiao had not had the opportunity to find some heaven's prides to cultivate in the upper world. Now the opportunity had come. Of course, Shadow Soul Palace was despicable and shameless, forcing women into prostitution. We are the light of the righteous path and will not force others to do anything. Oh, it's time to compete with our acting skills again. Hurry up. Don't let young master wait. Chi Li's voice came from afar. Then, girls of different appearances and clothes and rags walked out from the darkness in a line, their faces and bodies exposed to the bone. At this moment, their eyes were all extremely evasive, and they didn't even dare to look at others in the eye. It was obvious that the experience in the underground palace was a painful torture to their Tao hearts and minds. Young master, Chi Li walked out of the crowd and bowed to Ling Xiao. They're all here. A total of 173 people. 2 girls have died in the cages. It could be seen that Chi Li's eyes were burning with anger. Yes, Ling Xiao gently nodded and took a deep breath. You don't need to be nervous. I've killed everyone from Shadow Soul Palace. From now on, you are free. F freedom. Hearing this, a few women finally gathered their courage and raised their heads to look at Ling Xiao. The auras of these people were not weak. Almost all of them were at the peak God-Emperor realm. Some were even at the honorable realm. Of course, most of them were around 1,000 years old. Among them, there were many demons like Chi Li. That's right. I'll let you out in a moment. You can choose where you want to go. Ling Xiao waved his hand and took out hundreds of spiritual fruits, spiritual pills, and clothes from his cosmos bag. These spiritual pills can heal your injuries. Take them. But to Ling Xiao's surprise, there was actually not a single person that took the fortune in his hand at this moment. Obviously, these women did not dare to trust anyone easily. Seeing this, Chi Li frowned and popped a spiritual pill into her mouth. I've told you. I swear on my life that young master is a good man. He has killed Lord Sha. Lord Sha is dead? Gradually, people began to take the spiritual pills and swallow them. A faint light lit up in their dim eyes. Then, more and more women let down their guard and swallowed the spiritual pills to heal their injuries. Shadow Soul Palace's evil deeds are really infuriating. I, Ling Xiao, promise that sooner or later I will uproot this palace. Ling Xiao turned his head and looked in the direction of the main hall. He saw Ning Chuan and Xiong Huan walking side by side. Immediately, many women turned pale in fright and curled up on the ground in panic. Young master, all the disciples of Shadow Soul Palace have been killed. Ning Chuan bowed and looked at the women in front of him in surprise. These are the innocent girls captured by Shadow Soul Palace. You two go up first and capture all the disciples of Shadow Soul Palace. Ling Xiao's expression was cold as he softly instructed Ning Chuan. Then, he turned to look at the women. Let's go. I'll send you out. Of course, if any of you don't know where to go, I can also arrange a place for you to go and help you cultivate. Then, help me destroy these evil forces. With that, Ling Xiao no longer hesitated and walked into the depths of the tunnel. Now, to these women, he was like a savior. Moreover, most of the women who were captured by Shadow Soul Palace were from small sects and clans without any background. The elixirs just now were all 5th-grade elixirs. To ordinary clans, it was a fortune. Thinking about it, any woman with some ambition would understand that staying by Ling Xiao's side was a wise choice. Of course, the reason why Ling Xiao didn't force them to stay in the realm was not out of kindness. These people had all seen the cruelty of Shadow Soul Palace with their own eyes. If they chose to return to their clans, it was equivalent to spreading the evil deeds of Shadow Soul Palace to all parts of the Azure Continent. In this way, Realm Lord Hall's prestige would definitely suffer a heavy blow. In this world, where there was light, there was never a lack of darkness. In fact, the more dazzling the divine light, the deeper the source of darkness. And Ling Xiao's name would eventually resound in the Azure Continent like the sun, sacred and bright. In the end, Shuexian had completely lost this game of chess. We can go just like that. Many women were confused and didn't know what to do. Chi Li sighed softly and took the lead to follow Ling Xiao. Behind her, the women looked at each other. In the end, they suppressed the fear in their hearts and slowly walked towards the end of the tunnel. It wasn't until everyone passed through the formation and appeared in the fragrant fragrance restaurant that their faces flickered with excitement and disbelief. Immediately after, countless wails resounded through the hall, attracting the attention of countless cultivators. What's going on? Where do these girls come from? Shadow Soul Palace has committed a heinous crime. They forcefully detained innocent women and tamed them into death servants. Everyone, don't come to this fragrant fragrance restaurant in the future. I, Ling Xiao, dislike those sanctimonious bastards the most. How, Ba, go and capture those Soul Palace disciples for me. Ling Xiao kicked the door to the hall to smithereens and looked coldly at the guests in front of him. Ling Xiao, Ling people's young master. Ling Xiao. Instantly, the entire fragrant inn fell silent. Even the noble young masters who were about to retort kept quiet out of fear and quietly hid in the crowd. But then, everyone suddenly reacted. Shadow Soul Palace? Reserved women? Fragrant fragrance restaurant? Hiss. Chapter 14-15. Buzz. The entire fragrance brothel was in chaos. Ning Chuan and the others dashed out and captured all the ladies of the fragrant and who were originally gorgeously dressed. Looking at the group of trembling figures kneeling on the ground, a look of astonishment surfaced on the faces of all the experts from the various clans. Tell me who you are. Ling Xiao coldly snorted. He casually threw Sha Jing's corpse and the Shadow Soul Palace identity token in front of everyone. Sha, Lord Sha, it's really Shadow Soul Palace. Young Master, it's none of our business. We were also forced by Lord Sha and Lu Yinyan. They forced us to sell our bodies in exchange for information. Please forgive us, young master. All the women looked panicked. They no longer had the slightest bit of hope in their hearts. They all cried and begged for mercy. Lord Sha was dead. The fragrance brothel was finished. Ridiculous. Ling Xiao snorted coldly. He clenched his fists and heaved a long sigh. Shadow Soul Palace's crimes are unforgivable. If you live today, it'll be cruel to them. Ling Xiao's eyes were cold. His fingers suddenly stretched out. An array of sword radiance silently slashed down, directly chopping off the heads of the few ladies from the fragrant inn. Get lost. All of you get lost. Although he couldn't bear it, he was determined. It was obvious that this righteous young master was truly enraged. Thinking about it, in broad daylight, the Shadow Soul Palace, as one of the 7 great temples of the World Lord Palace, actually did such a disgraceful thing. Not to mention the young master, anyone with justice in their heart would be angry. However, if this was really done by Shadow Soul Palace, then didn't it mean that the Realm Lord Palace's supreme prestige and image of protecting the common people were all fake? Only you, Lord Ling Xiao, would fight the Sky Demon first and then expose the Realm Lord's hypocrisy. If it was any other clan's successor, they would be dead. Go. Let's go back to the clan and kill the maid we brought back a few days ago. In total, I brought back 5 of them, which cost me 7 million spirit stones. Now my father's going to break my legs. Shadow Soul Palace, despicable and shameless. Instantly, the crowd dispersed, and the entire pleasant fragrance brothel became completely deserted. You all can leave now. Ling Xiao took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart before turning to look at the 100 or so women. However, at this time, although the girls were looking forward to it, they didn't dare to act rashly. Seeing this, Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He took the lead and led Ning Chuan out of the building. Why, young master? Just as Ling Xiao was about to walk out of the fragrant inn, Qi Li's voice suddenly came from behind him. Ling Xiao's footsteps paused, but the corners of his mouth curled up into a subtle smile. Ollie, do you have something else? Don't worry, I'll naturally protect the Crimson Fox clan, and I won't let you have any worries. Ling Xiao's smile was warm and gentle, without a trace of the arrogance of a young master of the ancient race. He gave off an extremely amiable feeling. No, young master, Ollie wants to follow you. Qi Li clenched her silver teeth as if she had mustered up a lot of courage. Ling Xiao's identity could be said to be at the T0 level in the entire Azure world. Not to mention protecting the Crimson Fox clan. Even the Supreme Forces hoped to have some karma with Young Master. Young Master had just said that if there was no clan to return to, she could follow him back to the clan. This was an opportunity that could change the fate of the entire Crimson Fox clan. Although Chi Li also wanted to return to the clan to visit, if she missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to encounter it again in the future. Oh, have you thought it through? Ling Xiao raised an eyebrow and said calmly, Ali, you have to know that I don't keep idle people by my side. What I just said was that if there is no clan to return to, I can find a safe place for you to go. Young Master, I can do it. Ali can do anything. Chi Li's eyes were resolute. Clearly, she had made up her mind. This, Ling Xiao pondered for a moment and finally nodded. You can follow me, but it might be very dangerous, because there are many people in the Azure Sky world who want me dead. Moreover, the methods of those evil demons have always been very cruel. Ali is willing to swear with my Tao heart that I will never betray you in this life. If I violate this oath, my entire clan will be destroyed. Chi Li's red hair fluttered in the wind. She pointed 2 fingers at the sky and said coldly. Now it seemed that the World Lord Palace and the 7 palaces were just evil people wearing the skin of justice. Only Young Master remained the same on the outside. He was the true light of the Azure Sky continent. Following Young Master and bathing in the divine light would sublimate one's life. However, at this moment, Ling Xiao shook his head. I can give you a chance, but whether you can grasp it or not depends on you. Thank you, Young Master. Thank you, Young Master. Chi Li's eyes trembled and a smile appeared on her pretty face. Behind her, the 170 or so women looked at each other. Finally, they walked in front of Ling Xiao and bowed. We are willing to follow Young Master. We hope Young Master can fulfill our wish. This, Ling Xiao frowned and glanced at the remaining 20 or so people. All right, I'll give you one day to consider it seriously. If you've thought it through, come to the barren mountain north of the city to find me. I'll say it up front. I don't keep idle people by my side. If you really want to follow me, it may not be better than here. With that, Ling Xiao took a deep look at Chi Li before walking out of the city. Behind him, Ning Chuan rubbed his nose and a rare smile appeared on his face. He followed closely behind Ling Xiao. As for the remaining women, they looked at the 2 figures with different expressions, and their eyes were filled with contemplation. Lord Ling Xiao's words and actions were extremely upright and made people feel at ease. That's right. If they wanted to follow Young Master, they couldn't just be protected. They had to be useful to Young Master. Their greatest value was perhaps the camouflage and forbearance that they had been trained in the fragrant brothel. Young Master didn't plan on letting them go from the beginning, did he? Outside Han City, Ling Xiao was walking slowly with an indifferent expression. Ning Chuan suddenly opened his mouth and asked softly, Hearing this, Ling Xiao raised an eyebrow and his eyes turned cold. I deserve to die. Ning Chuan's heart turned cold. He felt a chill rising from the bottom of his feet. He immediately bowed. Actually, I just gave them a choice. As for what they choose, it's up to them. Ling Xiao smiled gently. In other words, he knew how to manipulate people's hearts. He knew how to make these pawns work for him willingly. In half a month, the world of souls will open. Prepare well. Next, there will be a great battle waiting for you. Yes. Ning Chuan's eyes trembled and his battle intent filled his face. Actually, he didn't care about Ling Xiao's scheme at all. What he really cared about was the right to kill by following Young Master. For him, only killing could bring him joy. After today's battle, he learned a lot. Only the battle intent that was honed in the sea of blood and mountains of corpses could truly kill gods. Chapter 14:16. In front of the Realm Lord Palace, Shuexian was dressed in white. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of gloominess in his eyes. The news of the Harmony Court had already reached his ears. However, compared to the destruction of this faction, he was more surprised by Ling Xiao's scheme. When Ling Xiao returned to the clan, he had already sent experts to guard outside the realm of gods to prevent this young master of the Ling people from making any more moves. But now, it seemed that the delay of 2 days and the killing of the Lin clan's prime were mostly to confuse him. More importantly, Qingyang's plan to kill Xia Chun and replace him had already pushed Shadow Soul Palace to the teeth of the storm. And now, Shadow Soul Palace was secretly capturing women and training death servants. They were no different from demons. The young master's righteousness was once again proven. Xue Xian's original plan was to tarnish Ling Zhao's reputation and test his bottom line. But now, it seemed that Xue Xian had suffered a crushing defeat in this game of chess. But the more it was like this, the more Xue Xian felt that Ling Zhao's temperament was terrifyingly deep. This youth must be hiding a shocking secret. Interesting. A well-matched opponent was the beginning of the journey to immortality. Young master. Behind Xue Xian, Lu Xinghe slowly walked over. His expression was also somewhat gloomy. He didn't approve of the young master's plan to begin with. But he still didn't expect the Realm Lord Palace to pay such a painful price this time. With the destruction of the Harmony Court, the Realm Lord Palace had lost countless spies and spies. This was undoubtedly a fatal blow to a sect that controlled the world. Call back all the world divine guards around the realm of gods. Xue Xian said indifferently. He didn't seem to feel disappointed because of this. Ling Zhao's battle strength and temperament were indeed frightening. But the young master chosen by the Taigu Ling people for 100,000 years should have such talent. No matter. As long as Xue Xian completed his plan, the world would belong to him. I'll give you time to grow, but in the end, you'll realize that your growth is meaningless. Some people already stand at the peak of the world from the moment they are born. When the red spider lily blooms, both immortals and devils die. But now, even if he guessed Ling Zhao's sinister intentions, it seemed to be of no use. Young master's righteousness had almost become the consensus of Qing Song. Ling Xiao, you and I will have a battle in the end. It concerns the lives of the world. Young master, do as I say. Xue Xian turned around and glanced coldly at Lu Xinghe. The latter didn't dare hesitate in the slightest, and he turned around and walked out of the hall. A day passed in the blink of an eye. North of Hanzhan City, on a pitch-black ancient mountain, Ling Xiao stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes deep and unfathomable. The fragrant Harmony brothel had been destroyed, and this trip had come to a successful end. It was time for him to return to his family and prepare for the opening of the world of souls. This time, Ling Xiao planned to bring Phoenix Rouge, Bai Jishi, and Floey to the lower realm. After all, the land of spirit chi recovery was full of good fortune. With Ling Zhao's strength alone, he might not be able to harvest all the spiritual objects. This time, Ling Xiao planned to sweep through this world and take all the good fortune for himself. Master! Stacked Shadow appeared behind Ling Xiao and bowed to him. You know what to do, right? Don't worry, Master. Stacked Shadow's eyes were cold. It was naturally easy for him to train death servants. Moreover, compared to Shadow Soul Palace's methods, Stacked Shadow was simpler. Planting a soul imprint was foolproof. Master, a few troublesome people have appeared in the Azure world. Stacked Shadow pondered for a moment, and a murderous look appeared on his face. Do you want to send someone to keep an eye on them? Oh, troublesome people? Ling Xiao smiled, his expression unperturbed. In terms of luck, the most powerful monster in this world was none other than Gu Chao Ci. In terms of power and background, Xue Xianyin was the best. Other than these two, the only person that Ling Xiao was curious about was Jun Hanch, who was in the Divine Monument of Tao. A passerby in a mortal world, the number one immortal in the 9 heavens. This title was too intimidating. Ling Xiao couldn't wait to see what this young man with the surname Jun had to call himself the number one immortal. That's right, the Xiaoyao Immortal Palace and the Blackwater Lake all had their descendants. They are invincible in the Azure world. However, the most terrifying one seems to have come from a forbidden place called the Lone Mountain. It is said that this person is undisciplined and is proficient in alchemy and medicine. Though he has never fought with anyone, Rumor has it that he has the ability to predict the future and can predict a person's fortune. Stacked Shadow's expression was serious. With this descendant of the Lone Mountain's ability, if he meets Ling Xiao, there will be a change. It is best to kill this person as soon as possible. Lone Mountain? Predict the future? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows, and his smile deepened. It seemed that this chaotic world had attracted many monstrous geniuses to come into being. However, the more this is the case, the more exciting it is. No need. We will meet these monsters sooner or later. It doesn't matter if we keep an eye on them or not. On the contrary, if they sense our hostility, it will only lead to more trouble. Ling Xiao shook his head and looked at the foot of the mountain. He saw that from the ancient forest, more than 10 graceful silhouettes were walking out. The one leading them was Qi Li, young master. Very quickly, the silhouettes of the women appeared before Ling Xiao. However, compared to a day ago, their expressions had calmed down a long time ago, and there wasn't a trace of panic left. With Ling Xiao's methods, he could force them to become his sole slaves without any pressure. However, there are some things that they have to do willingly in order to realize their greatest potential. Have you decided? Ling Xiao glanced at the women one by one and nodded. Since you have decided, I hope you won't regret it in the future. This is Double Shadow, my servant. During this period of time, you will follow her and cultivate. She will teach you more cultivation methods and skills. Of course, before that, she will set up some tricks in your soul consciousness to prevent people with ulterior motives from hiding around me. Young master, we understand. Qi Li and the others looked at each other without any hesitation. Their lives were saved by young master. What else could they not contribute? Moreover, for them, young master did not hesitate to provoke Shadow Soul Palace. He had taken countless risks. Once Shadow Soul Palace's pawns were among them, young master's situation would become more and more dangerous. Although there was no difference between becoming young master's servant and Shadow Soul Palace's servant. However, between the two, one was voluntary and the other was forced. There was no need to think too much about which choice to make. Okay, in that case, Double Shadow. Ling Xiao turned his head and glanced at Double Shadow. He suddenly stretched out his hand and directly put the women into his realm. He then stepped forward and quickly headed in the direction of the deity battlefield. Everything was ready. Now, he only needed to wait for half a month, and he could start a new path. Calculating the time, Su Yin had been in the lower realm for a year. With her talent, she should have occupied a very important position in the Su family. Chapter 14:17. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back in front of the central hall of the Realm of Gods. Behind him, Xinyuan Weiyang, Bai Jishi, Hua Hua, Ning Chuan, and Phoenix Rouge were waiting quietly. Currently, Hua Hua's cultivation had also reached the second rank of the Exalted Realm. Phoenix Rouge and Bai Jishi were relatively lazy and were only at the first rank of the Exalted Realm. However, the two women's luck had increased. Next, it was time to give them some opportunities to gain experience. Han Qingqiu and Ning were still in seclusion and were extremely hardworking. A day ago, to the east of the Azure Continent, a lower realm entrance suddenly spat out endless Tao. The spiritual aura that filled it was several times more terrifying than the Azure Continent. One had to know that this was a barren realm of the dead. It was the place where the Realm Lord Palace suppressed the sinners. The spiritual chi there was thin, and the strongest was only in the Saint Realm. This matter immediately attracted the attention of countless sects and factions. Everyone knew that the Azure Continent was the largest realm below the Immortal Realm. It was also known as the Mortal Realm. Under the Azure Continent were tens of thousands of small realms. Among these small realms, there were many ancient realms that had gradually used up their spiritual chi after hundreds of millions of years of development. Even so, there were still some ancestral realms that had given birth to true immortal seeds and divine veins. Therefore, the great Tao will in these realms would revive after hundreds of millions of years. Places like this would often give birth to a group of extremely talented beings with terrifying bloodlines. The Azure continent was currently in turmoil. All the sects and factions were working hard to fight for providence, hoping to gain the upper hand in this chaotic world. If they could find a few monsters with great providence in the world of souls, perhaps thousands of years later, it would be a new opportunity for them to control the world. Instantly, countless ancient clans and immortal sects sent their disciples to the lower realm to train. First, they wanted to find a treasure that could revive the spiritual chi. Second, they wanted to recruit disciples and bet on their future. Young Master, these are the pawns that the Ling clan has placed in the lower realm in advance. When you come to the lower realm, they will definitely follow you with all their might. Ling Yuanxing took out a piece of golden paper from his bosom and handed it to Ling Xiao. The latter immediately browsed through the list and memorized the names of the sects and forces in his mind. According to what Ling Yuanxing had said before, the world of souls was divided into 9 provinces. In each province, there was a powerful force in charge of order. As for the 3 sinful clans whose experts have been killed by the Realm Lord and sealed in the world of souls, they now occupied the 3 most prosperous divine lands of the 9 prefectures and could be said to be supreme. I understand. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently, and a fighting spirit suddenly appeared on his face. The omnipotent expert was merely at the Saint Realm. In other words, he was practically invincible in the world of souls. Let's go. Ling Xiao took a step forward, and the shadow of a demonic dragon appeared beneath his feet. It carried him out of the realm of the gods. Xinyuan Weiyang and the others circulated their spiritual energy and followed closely behind. All of a sudden, streaks of light were seen everywhere in the azure sky. Countless geniuses of different clans flew in the air and gathered in the direction of the world of souls. At the same time, in the Longevity Sure family, a slender figure stood on top of a mountain with his hands behind his back, looking at the end of the sky. Young Master, are we really going to let young Master Hao Yin continue to do whatever he wants? Behind him, an old man in brown clothes spoke in a weathered tone, and there was anger in his voice. Since he has decided, let him do as he pleases. Sure, he never looked back, and his back seemed somewhat bleak. For some reason, the young master of the Sure family seemed to be dispirited and extremely weak. But young master, you have paid such a price and placed all your hopes on young Master Hao Yin. Once he loses, perhaps this is the fate of the Sure family. If he loses, all the Sure family's vassals will be expelled, all the direct descendants of the Sure family will be summoned, and the ancestral land will be sealed. If our ancestors do not return, the Sure family will never appear again. With that, Sure sighed softly. His originally tall and straight back suddenly became somewhat hunched. It was as if this once high-spirited young master of the Sure family had used up all his vitality and was now in his twilight years. Polychoria was the path to invincibility, but in this world, who could be truly invincible? East of the azure sky, near the realm of ghosts, any territory or land that bordered the realm of ghosts would more or less carry a trace of ghost chi and death chi. Over time, the living beings in these places would be corroded by the ghost will and become evil ghosts. Then, they would be killed by the righteous. Therefore, most of these places were deserted and desolate. At this time, at the entrance of the world of souls, countless geniuses from various clans had gathered. Among them were the Crown Prince of Shenwu, Daoya of the Daotian Academy, Yuan Tianji of the Palace of Aries, the Wang family of Taiyuan Mountain, and many other familiar faces. Moreover, these were only the ones who appeared openly. In the surrounding barren mountains and ancient forests, there were still many powerful auras hidden. Clearly, they did not want to reveal their identities too early. At this time, the entrance of the world of souls was shining with golden light and rising clouds. However, the Tao mechanism was flourishing and was difficult to surpass. After a few days, this Tao mechanism showed signs of weakening. It was likely that in a short while, this lower realm would completely open. Look, what is that? Suddenly, A cry of surprise came from the crowd. Everyone looked up at the sky. They saw a dragon shadow that was hundreds of feet long falling from the sky. It did not care about the surrounding crowd and directly fell in front of the golden spiritual spiral. Instantly, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Smoke and dust rose. Gullies spread out horizontally and horizontally, crushing some of the weaker disciples to the ground. They looked extremely miserable. Seeing this, the disciples who were originally standing around the entrance retreated. Other than fear in their eyes, there was also a strong sense of anger. However, when they thought of the terrifying pressure emitted by the dragon's shadow, everyone quietly suppressed their anger. Only in the ancient forest, a blue-robed young man who was sitting quietly with his eyes closed suddenly opened his eyes. There was a hint of surprise and joy in the depths of his eyes. Around him, a few figures with strong auras stood quietly. Their faces were filled with shock. Young master, this demonic aura, it's actually someone from the demon clan. When did such a bloodline appear in the demon clan? Contrary to the reaction of the people outside the forest, this group of people's expressions were filled with unconcealable excitement. Don't be impatient, the blue-robed young man said indifferently. However, the battle intent revealed in his eyes was not concealed at all. Swoosh! At the end of the world, there were several sounds of wind breaking. Then, 3 beautiful women in different clothes stepped down from the sky and instantly attracted everyone's attention. Although the 3 women were peerless beauties, their temperaments were different. One of them was dressed in red. She was graceful and quiet. Her black hair was scattered, natural and graceful. The other was a young girl in a white fur coat with a strange expression. Her 2 fox ears were playful and cute. In her pair of pink eyes, there was a kind of fierce and domineering look. The last person was a tall and slender woman with a face that was as beautiful as a painting. However, her clothes were somewhat strange. She was wearing a white silk robe with a gray coat. Under the checkered short skirt, there was a pair of slender jade legs wearing white silk. Her lips were a kind of pink color, as if there was a layer of honey on them. They were crystal clear. Her hair was tied up in a bun and inserted diagonally with a thin jasper hairpin. It was pure and lustful. Inexplicably, this novel dress made her the most dazzling among the 3 women. Chapter 14:18. The world fell silent. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on the 3 women who fell from the sky. Their eyes were full of amazement. To put it bluntly, the 3 women with different temperaments in front of them had the power to bring disaster to all living things. The 3 women appearing together was too much for the eyes to take in. It was as if they had seen a miracle. However, at this moment, the 3 women stopped in their tracks at the same time. They turned around and bowed towards the smoke. Young master. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces fell again. Who is it? He actually had such a status that he could make these 3 goddesses, who were blessed by the heavens and earth, bow down to him. Everyone's gazes once again converged on the dust cloud. They saw a black figure slowly walk over. It tore through the fog and appeared in everyone's sight. Hiss! But when they saw the figure walking over, everyone's eyes narrowed and they exclaimed again. It was a woman with a slender figure. She was taller than many of the young men present. Her snow-white skin was like white jade, blooming with divine radiance. She was wearing a black skin-tight leather armor that accentuated her graceful figure. In her pure black eyes, there was an untamed wildness that made people's hearts itch. Valiant and seductive. What kind of divine beauty is this? But, young master, look at this girl's body. It's difficult to capture her with 2 hands. How did she become a young master? At this moment, a series of low footsteps came from the depths of the smoke. Then, a tall figure in black walked in front of the women and looked at them with a gentle gaze, although there was no aura on his body. However, all those who met his gaze felt terror that came from the depths of their hearts, and their hearts trembled. This is Master Ling Xiao. It's Master Ling Xiao. The originally silent, barren mountain and ancient forest suddenly burst into an uproar. At this moment, everyone's faces were full of shock and envy. It was obvious that the young master that the three women were talking about was the peerless young master with peerless looks and immortal looks. It was no wonder. Among the thousands of races in the Azure universe, which young master could make four goddess-like women bow their heads. Apart from Ling Xiao, it was hard to think of a second person. Even some of the saintesses and princesses of the divine dynasties were secretly looking forward to how wonderful it would be if they were the ones standing next to Lord Ling Xiao. On Gulin Shun's side, the blue-clothed young man's eyes were cold, and there was a different kind of deep meaning in his eyes. Ling Xiao, you finally appeared. However, compared to the reverence on everyone's faces, the battle intent on his face was even stronger. Even his eyes seemed to be blooming with golden light. His demonic aura was at its peak, causing fear to rise in people's hearts. At this moment, although Ling Xiao felt the hostility coming from the forest, he didn't care at all. Just now, he had seen a surge of fate appear in the forest. There were 14,000 of them. However, compared to him, Ling Xiao was more curious about what sort of monstrous genius of the heavenly mandate realm would be born in the lower dimensions. This barrier, Ling Xiao walked to the entrance of the lower realm with a surprised look on his face. Young master, be careful. This barrier not only contains the great Tao, but also an extremely terrifying sword intent. I'm afraid that a divine sword will appear in the lower dimensions. Suddenly, a cry of alarm came from the crowd, cautiously reminding Ling Xiao. Oh, a divine sword will appear in the lower dimensions? Ling Xiao's eyes flashed with a faint smile. Now it seemed that Su Yin had completed all the tasks that he had asked her to do. From another perspective, she should have gained a firm foothold in the world of souls. That's right, young master. I'm afraid that you will have a great fortune on this trip. Hey, with young master here, what fortune can escape from young master's palm? That's true. For people like us, it's our fortune to follow young master to broaden our horizons. Waves of flattery resounded in the wilderness, but Ling Xiao's face didn't change at all. At this time, he didn't see Gu Chaoxiai's figure in the crowd. It was obvious that she didn't intend to go to the lower dimensions. Thinking about it, Gu Chaoxiai's spiritual power had been exhausted in the realm of Hanyang, and her injuries were quite serious. With her talent, this kind of injury was not worth mentioning at all, but if she was targeted in the lower dimensions again, it would become Ling Xiao's weakness again. As for the fortune in the world of souls, with Ling Xiao's help, it naturally wouldn't fall into the hands of others. Ling Xiao, however, just as the crowd was humbling and surrounding Ling Xiao, a deep shout suddenly came from the ancient forest in the distance. Ling Xiao was slightly stunned and turned his head to look in the direction of the voice. The next moment, a flash of surprise suddenly flashed in his eyes. At this time, an ordinary-looking young man in plain clothes walked out of the ancient forest. There was a faint holy wolf flowing on his body, and the Taoist rhyme was overflowing. He was like an ancient god, endlessly oppressing people. The 9th level of the Venerable Realm, 10,000 fate points. This is Shi Haotian of the Shi clan. Along with the shout of surprise, the confusion on the faces of the crowd instantly disappeared, and a trace of undisguised disdain appeared on their faces. Shi Haotian's name had already resounded in the Azure world 200 years ago. It was not to say that his strength was as invincible as the rumors said, but as Gu Chaoxiai's lackey, this young master of the Shi clan had relied on his identity to suppress and kill many geniuses of the various sections. However, just a year ago, when the Daotian Academy opened, this Shi Haotian had once confessed his love to Empress Gu in front of Master Ling Xiao, and in the end, he was directly crippled. Fortunately, the young master was kind and benevolent. Although all the bones in his body were broken, he still sent someone to send him back to the Shi clan. This kind of action that was full of love not only frightened the other geniuses of the various sects who coveted the Empress's beauty, but also made Ling Xiao's reputation rise again. Now, in the Azure world, Everyone knew that Empress Immortal Phoenix Gu Chao Ci was Master Ling Zhao's weakness. Anyone who dared to touch her would only end up in an incomparably miserable state. Unexpectedly, in just a year, not only did this Shi Haoyan recover from his injuries, but he also seemed to have been reborn, blooming with brilliance again. In particular, the aura around him was vigorous and heavy, mixed with the holy will, giving off a domineering aura that was fearless in the world. Was this a blessing in disguise? However, if you're blessed, then so be it. Why don't you just obediently stay in the clan and enjoy life? Why did you jump in front of Master Ling Zhao so impatiently? Sure, Haoyan. Ling Zhao's smile was gentle and even a little gratified. When he first saw this person, he felt that his identity should not be simple. However, at that time, Shi Haoyan did not have any providence, which was more or less a pity. Therefore, Ling Zhao deliberately gave him a trial and some humiliation to see if it could stimulate the fighting spirit in the bottom of his heart and awaken some useless talents. As expected, in a year, the peak of the venerable realm, 10,000 providence. It seemed that this Shi Haoyan's talent was more terrifying than he imagined. Phew! Shi Haoyan stepped in front of Ling Zhao and glanced at the girls one by one, his face becoming more and more sinister. Ling Zhao, you are so licentious. How can you face Chaozi? Chapter 1419. Did Shi Haoyan change his name to Shirliji? How dare he question young master? His injuries have just healed, and he has already forgotten the lesson from before. The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear. Young master, I suggest that we directly kill him this time. Sounds of mockery could be heard from the crowd. As expected, the people who spoke were all extras who did not have any luck. Only a son of Providence, like the blue-clothed young man, had a surprised expression on his face at this moment. It was obvious that Shi Haoyan was not here to die today. After surviving a great disaster, one would definitely have a fortuitous encounter. It seemed that Ling Zhao was going to be unlucky today. Do you think you are qualified to call me that? Ling Zhao's eyes were cold, but there was a smile on his face. It seems that you have forgotten what I said. Ling Zhao, I am not worthy of Gu Chao Sai, but are you? Shi Haoyan took a deep breath and ignored the crowd's mockery. In the past year, he had awakened the true dragon's sacred body, and his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. He was also hesitant about whether he should put down the greed in his heart and focus on cultivation. However, he could not do it. He could not do it at all. Every time he wanted to take a step forward and enter the sage realm with the power of the sacred body, the demonic barrier in his heart would appear uncontrollably. That peerless figure had become a natural barrier that he could not cross and blocked all his immortal paths. Even if he was endlessly talented, he could not cross this barrier in his heart. If he was too stunning, he would regret it for the rest of his life. If he could not forget it, it might not be a response. It might even be a demonic barrier. Then, Ling Zhao shook his head and smiled naturally. At this moment, he naturally saw that Shi Haoyan had awakened the sacred body again. However, no matter how real the true dragon sacred body was, could it be as real as the ancestral dragon soul that Ling Zhao had merged with? Therefore, in the human race, no one could compare to Ling Zhao in terms of dragon bloodline and dragon bloodline. Then, Ling Zhao, what I hate the most is this nonchalant expression of yours. Do you know that Gu Chao Ci is the dream of many geniuses in the Azure continent? You've won her heart, yet you don't care. Shi Haoyan fiercely clenched his teeth, his fists suddenly clenching tightly. Boundless golden light began to bloom around his body, like a volcano that could erupt at any time. And then, ha, Ling Zhao, you're not worthy of Gu Chao Ci. Do I need an ant like you to judge whether I'm worthy or not? Shi Haoyan, I was kind enough to spare your life so that you could recognize reality and be a good person. I didn't expect that you would disappoint me too much. Ling Zhao shook his head and sighed, his eyes filled with regret. When this scene landed in Shi Haoyan's eyes, it caused the resentment in his heart to surge even more violently. He was originally a prodigy of a Shur family and had been searching for Gu Chao Ci for 200 years. Although the immortal Phoenix Empress had never looked him in the eye, everyone in the Azure Continent felt that Shur Haotian, was definitely Gu Chao Ci's final destination. If he hadn't gone into seclusion, how could Ling Xiao have a chance to fight against the two sages and kill Jier? In Shur Haotian's opinion, the reason why Gu Chao Ci fell in love with Ling Xiao was because this young master of the Ling people had helped and moved her during that difficult time. After all, everyone knew that Ling Xiao had only been born for a year. It was impossible for them to have feelings for each other. And all of this could have been done by Shur Haotian. Regret, pain. What use do I have for my cultivation? Be a good person? Ling Xiao, the humiliation you gave me today, I'll make you pay back 100 times. I want you to understand that Gu Chao Ci is not someone a half-hearted person like you can have. Shur Haotian roared towards the sky. The more he looked at Xinyuan Weiyang and the others beside Ling Xiao, the angrier he became. At this moment, he wished he could kill Ling Xiao and these women, because their existence was a provocation to Chao Ci. Boom! Tens of thousands of rays of light shot into the sky. The entire ancient forest had long become deathly silent. Everyone looked at the crazed Shur Haotian and increasingly felt that he should be called Shur Luji. Empress Gu and Lord Ling Xiao couldn't be said to be an immortal couple. They could only be said to be a match made in heaven. Regardless of whether it was the two of them reaching the peak of the heaven realm side by side, or the unwillingness to part in the sage's wall of illusion, everyone understood that the feelings between the two of them were extremely deep and sincere. What kind of plaything was this Shur Haotian? Could you understand the happiness of the Empress? Actually, you should ask Gu Chao Ci. In my eyes, no one in this world is worthy of my young master. However, just as Shur Haotian took a step forward and was about to rush towards Ling Xiao, a cold voice suddenly sounded from the end of the sky. Then, a wave of coldness quietly swept through the area. Heaven and earth became cold. Even the vegetation in the ancient forest seemed to be covered in frost. Their vitality withered. Countless cultivators were stunned. A hint of fear flashed in their eyes. At this moment, they could feel that under the corrosion of this coldness, the spiritual energy and even the blood in their bodies were showing signs of freezing. It was too terrifying. This kind of coldness seemed to have transcended the power of Tao laws. It was more like a kind of origin that controlled heaven and earth and sealed everything. Who is it? Spiritual light lit up around everyone's bodies in an attempt to resist the coldness. After which, everyone saw a green-clothed lady walking over from the sky. Her otherworldly and flawless face contained a faint trace of killing intent. Her hair fluttered in the wind. She had a transcendent temperament, but she was also as cold as a mountain. Although her figure was not as tall as Hua Hua's, it was extremely well-proportioned. Her waist was slender and could be held in one hand. Her mountain peaks were towering and steep. Her jade-like legs under her green clothes were white and smooth, slender and graceful. As her green clothes fluttered, it was as if a primordial divine lotus bloomed in the sky. It was indescribably noble and holy. I won't allow you to insult Gu Chao Ci. Shur Haotian's face turned serious. Killing intent fluctuated in his eyes. He abruptly took a step forward and charged towards the woman in green. Die! Shur Haotian stretched out his hand. A wave of golden light that could be seen with the naked eye suddenly condensed. Then, like scales, it densely covered his skin. Roar! Accompanied by a dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens, a terrifying demonic aura suddenly erupted. A golden dragon's claw seemed to reach out from the void and crush down on the woman in green. This palm print had clearly touched the realm of the saint stage. That dragon's aura made the many geniuses of the ancient sects feel a chill in their hearts. A hint of fear and shock flashed in their eyes. However, in the face of the dragon's claw that covered the sky, the woman in green did not panic at all. She stretched out her hand, and endless frost quietly spread out. The void froze, and everything was frozen. With a thought, the entire world strangely came to a standstill. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.